Okay. Good morning, everybody. We're going to be calling the Board of Supervisors meeting to order. It is 9:01 a.m. this December 8th meeting. This is an amended special meeting agenda today, so thank you, everybody, taking time out of your day to come and join us. I'm ask my colleague, Supervisor Mike Holland, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready to begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. So we'll move in a moment into the consent calendar because it's a special meeting. We do not have the traditional oral communication section of the agenda. We do have 4 items there on consent, and then we're going to be having our 10 a.m. appointment on the September Lightning Complex fire as well. So with that, will the clerk read the consent calendar? Oh, first, do we want to pull any items off the consent calendar? All right, seeing none, please read 1 through 4.
Item number 1, adopting Resolution 101-25, approving Amendment number 9 to the Memorandum of Understanding between the County of Tuolumne and the Operating Engineers number 3 OE3 Master Unit. Item number 2, adopting Resolution 102-25, approving Amendment number 7 to the Memorandum of Understanding between the County of Tuolumne and the Operating Engineers number 3 OE3 Healthcare Unit. Item number 3, rescinding Resolution 78-25 and adopting Resolution 103-25, declaring 18740 CA 108 Jamestown, California, assessors parcel numbers 059-050-030-000 and 059-050-031-000 statutorily exempt from the review under Section 15268 of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and stating the intent to donate the property to a housing sponsor through the issuance of a request for proposals. Item number 4, rescinding Resolution 82-25 and adopting revised Resolution 104-25, authorizing application and signature delegation to the County Administrative Officer for California Office of Emergency Services unserved/underserved UV program request for application for non-competitive funding from January 1, 2026 through December 31, 2026.
Nicely done. Okay, with that, we will open up public comment on these 4 items. If any members of the public would like to come speak, you'll be able to have 3 minutes on any of the 4 listed items just mentioned. Good morning.
Good morning, Board. Karen McGettigan, Human Resources. 2 of those items on the consent calendar this morning are amendments to existing labor agreements with the Operating Engineers Local Number 3 for both the Master Unit and the Healthcare Unit. The agenda for today's meeting needed to be published on December 1st in order to make the calendar for today. The OE3 units did not hold their votes until the 2nd and 3rd, respectively, so I did not have those agreements prepared to upload with the agenda, but I do have them now. I printed copies on the back for any member of the public. Just quick highlight, quick summary, neither amendment includes any wage adjustments, but the county did approve an increase to the county contribution to health care. I guess that's it, yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mike Deanda, Business Representative for Operating Engineers, Local 3. Most of you know I am the business rep for the 2 items that are on number 1 and number 2. I do want to say that I did work with your lead negotiator and your HR department after you gave the proposal to give us time to disseminate out the offer, schedule a ratification vote, and we worked until about 8 o'clock on Friday night, just dialing in the language to make sure signatures would get on there. So obviously this is, we want these adopted today, but the messaging from the membership was, please let the board know that we're still taking a pay cut with this offer. So we appreciate that you guys moved off of the previous offers from May and March, but it's still a pay cut. And respectively, if you go back from the messaging that we've given before, that this is now going to be the 4th and 5th year of pay cuts for both these bargaining units. There was no wage increases or any help to health insurance in the previous 3 and 4 years. There is help this year with the health increases that you guys proposed that we ratified and we want you to adopt today, but it still falls short and it's still in out of pocket. So again, just please understand, this is the 4th and 5th year going into that it is a pay cut. The membership is still telling me, hey, look, we're still going to food pantries and food banks. There are several employees on public assistance, government subsidized healthcare, and they want me to relay to you that their stories matter. They're still working 2 to 3 other positions on top of theirs, and it's taking a toll, and it has been taking a toll over the last few years. So I just wanted to deliver the message that we want you to adopt this, but please moving forward, and you don't have to wait until negotiations next year, if you have any end of year surplus, to seriously consider putting it towards your employees in either wages or in health care. So I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. All right. Good morning.
I work at public health, but I'm here in my own time. So I'm here to discuss the recent contract for employees who are part of the OE3 unit, your frontline workers. This was not a great offer. It was, I think, a bad offer, but we are accepting it out of pure desperation. We are accepting a contract where, again, we will make less money next year than we do this year. We accepted this bad offer because the alternative was even worse. It was an even larger pay cut. So we were between a rock and a hard place, faced with a choice of a larger pay cut or a smaller pay cut. But I think you guys all know this. I think this is why we were offered this not great contract in the first place, because you really knew we had no choice but to accept it. So I'm here to say it out loud, to announce to the board, to the public, that we got a bad deal, that we still have an unfair contract, one that we only accepted out of desperation. There's been no increase in wage or cost of living adjustments in years. We have county employees who are in public assistance, going to food banks. I know full-time employees who are homeless. All because the county doesn't pay people enough to live on. And in a few weeks, we all make even less. This is not a fair contract.
Thank you.
Good morning.
morning.
My name is John Flynn, your political watchdog. Take a bite out of crime. Arf, arf, arf. All right, enough of that. And I want to talk just a couple of things. There's an excellent couple of websites that I would like the general public to check out if they have the time. ClassicalLearner.com, and it's called ClassicalLearner.com. It's about history, and it talks about a lot of things. And if you
John,
like,
sorry to interrupt.
What?
We don't have a general oral communication, so it has to be related to one of the 4 consent calendar items because it's a special meeting.
all right. What's
So
like when
we
what's
have
that?
2 bargaining items. We have one related to the miners motel resolution, and then we have one for the Office of Emergency Services.
Well, when's the public meeting?
During the normal, regularly scheduled meetings. So you can ask our clerk for the next meeting date if you have that up.
Tomorrow?
Yeah, next Tuesday. Not tomorrow.
All right.
Great. Sorry to interrupt on that. Thank you. Appreciate your patience. Great. And I will, it's a little unusual with it, just a reminder for folks, our next item is a 10 a.m. appointment. We can't start that early, so if you wanted to use this opportunity to share in these items some of the things that you may be dealing with the work or related to the contract. I know we have a lot of members in the audience from OE3. I think this would be a really good point to be able to help us listen. So, morning. Morning. And
State my name.
please go ahead, 3 minutes you can, but you don't have to.
Okay, well, I'm just going to share a little bit about myself. I came to work for this county about 4.5 years ago. I have consistently made less every single paycheck. It has diminished. I have genetic condition, causes me to have liver cirrhosis that I have to see the doctor for on multiple occasions monthly. I've had to have my wife and my daughter taken off of my insurance just so that I can afford to keep mine going so I can stay alive and keep working for them. The amount of stress and frustration that I feel about, they want us to come in and do a good job. They want us to come in and do everything we can to provide the best services, and I feel like the people that we work with do that. But at the same time, we're going home feeling beaten, left out, uncared for, unsupported, and just kind of left to figure it out. And I know that for me personally, I don't want more than my share, but I want to be able to provide for my family. I don't feel like work should take over and, every new responsibility, every new duty, every new thing that we do, we take it, we do it, we get it done. And I applaud the people that work for these right now because you guys are amazing. They all do their job. But I feel like right now we're not getting the job done for us that we should. So I would like you to please start to understand what it's like for the little guys and what we go through. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Do we have any additional public comment on these items? Good morning.
Morning. So my name is Tasha Miller. I work with behavioral health. Sorry, I'm super nervous. I just kind of want to be super generic and basic. After being there 1.5 years, it exceeds expectation, promotional and bumps, and turning in certificates. I just barely bring home $700 every 2 weeks. My insurance is $2,700 a month. And with the cost that it's going up, you guys covered 12%, so we'll cover the 2. We are out there in the field Monday through Friday. I've even done weekends with the unsheltered, severe mentally ill. And so I just kind of want you guys to understand what we do. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Do we have additional public comment?
Good morning, board.
Good morning.
I'm Casey Bedford. Hi, Mike. I came to the county 9 years ago. I left the banking world. I work at Department of Social Services. I get to help people in need every day. And when I put a smile on their face, it makes my day. So to sit here and not have a raise for 5 years, my husband works at the sawmill 12-hour days, and we can't even get by, and we only have 1 kid. So I can't imagine. I hate going to the grocery store these days. You guys know how expensive groceries are. We can't eat out. We have no luxuries. So I just want to reach out, and the amount, we have to switch to my husband's insurance because I can't pay $800 a month for health insurance. That's crazy. I have to work 3 other jobs. I have to clean cabins with my son. He's 1 year old. He has to come with me to clean so I can make extra money to put food on the table. So it's very emotional. So I'm thinking about leaving the county after 9 years to go have a waitressing job so I can make more money and be on Medi-Cal because we just can't get by. So please, I'm worried about Christmas this year. Everybody I work with, I can't get anybody Christmas gifts. I'm trying to bring the Christmas cheer. This year, we set up a food pantry in our lunchroom to help each other this year instead of taking it to Interfaith and to ACCA like we normally do because we need the food. So, thank you.
Thank you. And do we have any additional public comment? All right, go once, going twice. All right, with that, we will close public comment thank you, everybody, for attending and for making comments, too. I know it can be intimidating. I don't think of us as intimidating, but I know that the space can be, and it's appreciated. It's very much appreciated. So with that, I'll bring it back to the board for any questions or discussion on items 1 through 4. Supervisor Campbell? I thought I saw you tap.
I was ready to make a motion.
Do we have
I
any?
have no questions.
I do have a comment that I wanted to share. I was going to speak last if there was no other comments on here too. But I know that 2 years ago, we're coming up into a new priority session as a board. We're going to be setting 1 or 2 year priorities depending on how we do it. The last section was 2 year priorities. And one of those priorities was to become the employer of choice in the region. Part of that was we've struggled with vacancies. And ultimately, people at the county are the ones who actually get the work done. A part of that has been the retention of employees that are doing the work in all of these programs as well. And I recognize that that hasn't been where it needs to be. And we've had some solutions come forward that would help create some of the revenue that's needed for it. And unfortunately, they haven't passed as needed. And so I want to say that I appreciate you being here because that engagement is really needed, I think, in that process. It's really needed. And we can't keep continuing on the path that we're at. We're going to be losing good people. We have been losing good people. It's expensive and it's difficult to recruit, to get somebody up to understanding how their job works, much less the expertise, how to do it very well, to know all the different departments, and do what we can to restore the dignity of county work and working for the county. That should be a goal. The path to get there with some of the challenges the county does have, they are real challenges. We need our labor partners there to help push for these solutions because a lot of times when it's talking about revenue or what we need to be able to make these decisions, and then ultimately to what is done with that revenue, they are often not easy, popular decisions. It's unfortunate that in the public sentiment, there's a lot of folks who talk down about county employees, public employees in general, not specifically county. And I brought this up to some of our community meetings that we have a problem in Tuolumne County where people degrade and disrespect public employees who work their tails off here. And it's not to say there aren't bureaucracies in the state that can be more efficient, that there aren't, that I see it here at the local level. People work hard, they do a good job, and they don't get the respect that they deserve. So for any members of the public that are watching that, we don't offer particularly high compensation and benefits. I hope that we have a good team, but the least we can do is offer, I think, respect in that. And then as leaders, a seat at the table to make sure that when solutions do come up, we're all pushing for the same thing. We're making a united kind of vision for that. So when push comes to shove, there is revenue on the table. We can be able to make those decisions. We can't stay on this path. We can't forever not have any increases to folks who are using the services that they are then paid to provide to others. So with that, be looking, if there's no further questions or comments, motion from the board.
Move to approve consent.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a first by Supervisor Campbell. We have a second by Supervisor Holland. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, abstaining. All right, passes unanimously. And we have Supervisor Kirk absent. Thank you again for attending. Now we have our 10 a.m. meeting. Again, we can't start before 10 a.m. So we're going to be recessing this meeting until 10 a.m. and then we'll reconvene into the Lightning Complex fire. Presentation on the TCU September Lightning Complex fire item. Thank you, everybody. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're reconvening the Board of Supervisors meeting for our 10 a.m. appointment. If the clerk will read the item.
10 a.m. presentation on the TCU September Lightning Complex fire.
Good morning.
Good morning, Board. Chairman Brandon, members of the board, county staff. My name is Nick Cashy. I'm the unit chief for the CAL FIRE Tuolumne Calaveras unit. Also serve as your fire chief for Tuolumne County Fire Department and Groveland Community Services District. With me today, I have Assistant County Fire Chief Nathan Gorham to my left, Deputy Chief of Operations for CAL FIRE TCU on my right, Kevin Bohal, and Robert Anzar, our Tuolumne County Volunteer Fire Captain out of Station 61 in Chinese Camp. We're here today to do a presentation at your request of the TCU September Lightning Complex, with specifics to the 6-5 fire. So with that, we will have Deputy Chief Kevin Bohall, who was the unit duty chief that day, start the presentation, and we'll go through and then get to questions towards the end. Any questions before we get started?
Looking right, looking left. I think take it away.
Thank you.
All right, good morning. The opening slide here has a briefing map specifically to the TCU Lightning Complex, which went on from September 2nd to September 13th, 2025, and it was 21 separate fires. Those 21 fires together totaled 13,869 acres. So on September 1st, this was the day before the complex. This was the first day I had duty chief coverage. The National Weather Service put out some predicted weather that was something that we had to plan for. Valley heat, which we'd had for multiple days to this point. A slight chance of mountain thunderstorms. Actual thunderstorm activity, timing, and elevation and intensity were largely unpredicted. So it was a slight chance of thunderstorms at the highest elevations to go along with the heat. September 2nd, weather conditions and fuel conditions. This is pretty consistent for what we get in this area of the world in California. Fine fuels were fully cured and highly receptive during peak burning periods. Brush fuel moisture was estimated to be around 65% based on 30-day live first fuel moisture samples approaching critical thresholds. The energy release component and burn index were both near the 90th percentile at the onset of the incident, though those trended downward later in the incident when the weather changed. Heavy fuels continued to smolder for days, and rollout from these fuels created risks of ignitions outside of the containment lines. And lightning holdovers and ember casts were considered possible contributors to fire spread throughout the duration of the incident. Before we go to the next slide, you guys can see the map there. That's actually precipitation totals that we got with the lightning event, which were all very low. Most of them came without wetting rain or very little wetting rain. So this is an example of a staffing pattern. So we're in this California southern region. So essentially, when there's some time that we think that we're going to have elevated fire weather or elevated fire weather conditions, we put on staffing patterns. So that's where we staff additional resources. Those could be engines, crews, dozers, any of those sort of things that we might need to fight fire. So this one came out, excuse me, the day before the complex on Monday at noon. It was for staff all CAL FIRE crews, CDCR Firefighter 1 CCC, staff 2 qualified division supervisors per unit, in addition to what we normally have for overhead, staff all camp and reserve fire engines. TCU had 1 strike team each of engines, dozers, and crews out of county on previous assignments. So we already had fire activity going on prior to this, so some of our resources were committed out of the unit. Staffing that was available in TCU, we had 19 engines, 9 crews, 2 private hire dozers, all aircraft assigned to Columbia, which included the Air Attack, 2 air tankers, 1 CAL FIRE Black Hawk helicopter, and 1 exclusive use Black Hawk helicopter. So the statewide lightning. On September 1st, a total of 9,619 lightning strikes were received statewide. On September 2nd, a total of 16,761 lightning strikes were received statewide. This was a total of 26,380 for the 2-day period. It resulted in 157 fires that went for 44,735 acres. Impacts to counties north and south of Tuolumne Calaveras unit, restricting available resources. So when you look at that map, some of the thing that we do get on lightning events, a lot of the times it's going to be consolidated to the higher elevations, areas that are prone to lightning. These events were somewhat atypical that they were giving lightning activity all the way to the valley floor. So here's specific to the southern region lightning where we're at. Overnight, we had excessive thunderstorm activity occurred with well above predicted intensity, as well as tracking at a much lower elevation, so mainly between 3,000 feet and the valley floor along Highway 99. Most of the lightning activity included little precipitation. Areas surrounding and adjacent to the Tuolumne Calaveras unit and bond were impacted by numerous fire starts from these thunderstorms. The Amador El Dorado unit had 8 fires. The Madera Mariposa Merced unit had 8, as well as the Stanislaus National Forest and local jurisdiction in Stanislaus and San Joaquin counties. Around 4 a.m., resources and personnel experienced excessive thunder and lightning across the unit. The first fire, which was the 1-1, was dispatched at 5:22 a.m. And I'll go over how we name the fires on the next slide. TCU duty chief initiated a hold all personnel on duty from the ranks of firefighter 1 to battalion chief and staff fire lookouts as appropriate. Both were effective on 9/2 at 7 a.m. So I was in the command center well before daylight. I'm working through this, and we actually had fires in the LRA that were being requested by local jurisdictions for us to go assist. And I had already contacted our air attack and worked on getting early up of aircraft because we knew that we were going to have fire activity that day.
An LRA, local responsibility area?
So local responsibility area, specifically to incorporated cities in the front country, cropland, and things like that, mostly down the Clements, Linden, Peters, and Stanislaus area. 9 fires have been dispatched by 9 a.m. Fires in all 4 counties, so San Joaquin, Stanislaus, Tuolumne, and Calaveras, within our direct protection area. And the largest fire at that point was the 2-2 fire, which was in Stan County. 1,000 acres, and we were in unified command with Modesto Fire Department. At that point, we placed a large resource order to staff those fires and backfill stations for coverage. So here, I really like this one map, and I'll talk about that too. But the way that we number the fires are, there's 6 field battalions in the Tuolumne Calaveras unit, and each of those field battalions has a number, so 1 through 6. So when we have a multi-incident action plan, or like we used to call them an LCA, lightning plan, when you actually have those, you number them by battalion because you're going to have to manage this differently than you do individual incidents. So 1-1 would be Battalion 1, that's the San Andreas Battalion, and that's the first fire there. If there's a second fire in the San Andreas Battalion, it's going to be 1, 2, and so on. So the first fire, regardless of size, you're going to have to come up with an appropriate dispatch for that fire. And with that multi-incident action plan, what happens is you allocate resources a little bit differently than we do on a normal dispatch out of the emergency command center. So the 1-1 fire, we got that one taken care of pretty quickly. That one was 4.83 acres. The 2-1 was 0.35. The 2-2 was 3,462 acres. That's the one I was speaking of that was over 1,000 already. The 1-3 was 95.24 acres. That one was interesting because it actually got a name because we thought it was an LRA fire because it was right on the border. 2-3 was 294 acres. The 2-4 was 47. 6-2 was 1,024 acres. The 2-5 was 0.1.
I just want to reference the 6-2 fire specifically. If you look on your map in the lower right-hand corner, you have 3 heat spots that signify the fires. The 2 just to the left of Don Pedro there in the lower right corner is a 6-2 and 6-5. And I just want to make note of that because the 2 are very close together, somewhat close start times by a couple hours, but had some confusion on which fire was which.
Thank you. Yeah, so the 2-5 was 0.01, the 5-1 was 0.01, the 6-3 was 1.0, and the 6-4 was 0.01. Before we go on, one of the things I wanted to point out is the variation in acreage. So remember, each of these fires were put out over such a broad area over 4 counties. You have different fuel types, you have different fuel conditions, and you have different amounts of wetting rain, all those things that go into how large they got. And then suppression efforts on top of that is what dictates that. So you look at the picture that we have there, and that's a fire model of if the fires continue to grow unsuppressed. You can see how widespread those are and the variations in where they're going to go because of fuel type and terrain.
Which one is this one?
Steve, mine.
Sorry.
That one, I believe.
Give me 1 second. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that reminder. For the microphone and for the people at home, my question is, which designation is this fire?
That one, I think it's on the next slide. Can you go one slide, Nate? I believe that's the 6-6. So there was one that we had down by Moccasin. I can't see the map. Yeah, it's marked on your map there, but my eyes aren't that good.
6-4.
6-4, I'm sorry. That's the 6-4 fire. So as we went, these are all in sequential order of when they started. Then we had the 2-6 at 1/4 acre, the 5-2 at 2.8, the 5-3 at 0.01, the 6-5 at 7,037. Also notice I put in the notes no divert. I'll talk about that. The 4-5, 3.2 acres, which was extremely remote. up on near the border of the Stanislaus National Forest. The 1-2, which was 40.42, the 2-7, which was 606, which once again had a no divert, and then the 2-8 at 1332, the 5-4 at 0.01, and the 6-6 at 15 acres. So we showed the wide variation there, and the two that had the no divert, at some point during the incident, they had a no divert for aircraft for life safety. So at that point, when you have a no divert, you don't send the aircraft to any new or emerging incidents. So this is a time depiction. So when he hits the forward, oh, here it goes. It's going to show the fires in sequence and growth. So that's a good depiction. It shows a lot of fires in a short period. So allocation of resources. So with the large volume of fires, the multi-incident action plan was initiated. All fires transitioned to be suppressed as a complex under one command structure. While firefighting resources were allocated to new incidents, control and containment objectives were being completed on current fires. The second wave of thunderstorms with erratic outflow winds challenged firefighting resources. This caused significant growth on many of the incidents. New ignitions were also being reported. Life safety was a priority, followed by protecting property and infrastructure, and allocation of resources were determined utilizing these objectives. Both sheriff's offices ensured evacuation warnings and orders were issued to ensure safety for the public as well as first responders.
So I'll go ahead and I'll walk you through two specific fires, the 2-7 and the 6-5, as they have relatable timelines to each other, and they also were the two fires that had the significant impact to structures in two separate counties. For reference, going back to the original slide of the 21 fires in a 24-hour period, roughly for the Tuolumne Calaveras unit, on a yearly average, that number 21 is about 7.5% of the total fires we would run the entire year. And that was in one operational period. So just for perspective there. So the 2-7 incident was located between Vallecito and Murphy's and was dispatched at 11:53. It was reported at 100 acres with structures immediately threatened at 12:38. And please pay close attention to the 12:38 time frame. At 2:28 p.m., the fire crossed 6 Mile Road with evacuation orders issued for Murphy's and a no divert on aircraft for life safety with the immediate structure threat. At 3:41 p.m., a request for additional resources immediate need was made, and the 2-7 quickly became a priority incident due to the immediate life threat. Concurrently, resources assigned to the 6-5 were experiencing increased fire conditions and impacts. So to start the 6-5 fire timeline, the incident was located approximately 3.5 miles from Chinese camp. When we say 3.5 miles, we don't mean driving miles, we mean air miles or straight line distance. I'd like to give a perspective to everybody here that if we were to draw a straight line for 3.5 miles from this location, we could roughly end up at the hangars on Airport Road at the Columbia Airport. So that was the distance the fire was at the initial start from any structures. Or correction, from Chinese camp where the large structure population was. It was on the Bureau of Land Management, Red Hills Recreation Management Area, and it was dispatched at 10:32 a.m. At 11:15 is when resources were able to make access, which was difficult due to the remoteness of the fire, and reported 2 to 3 acres. Incident commander places the initial request for resources at that time. At 11:45, it was reported at 5 to 7 acres with a moderate rate of spread and additional requests for resources, including aircraft. At 12:08, the updated to 20 to 25 acres with a moderate dangerous rate of spread and a request for additional crews, dozers, engines, and aircraft. Now notice the incremental acreage increases over that time frame, and we get to 12:58, where it goes to 200 acres with a dangerous rate of spread towards Highway 120, and a large resource order was placed. That's roughly 20 minutes after the 2-7 was immediate structure threat and was the priority with resources and aircraft due to the no divert. So you can see the overlapping timelines and the progression of each fire happening concurrently. At 1:11, a request for evacuation warnings for Red Hills and 6-Bit Ranch Roads was made. And continuing at 3:12 p.m., an immediate need engine request for structure defense. So at 3:15, the aircraft request was specific to structure defense. And at 3:18, all evacuation warnings requested upgrade to evacuation orders. It's important to take note that we don't have the authority to do evacuations. We make the recommendations with the sheriff's office, and the sheriff's office has the authority for the implementation of evacuation warning and orders. I bring that up because I really want to compliment the sheriff's department on the great job they did specifically in evacuations in a rapidly expanding incident that resulted in no loss of life. At 3:45, the air attack requested no divert on aircraft and numerous resources previously committed to the imminent life threat on the 2-7. And at 4:07 p.m., request additional immediate need engines. And at 4:11, the updated acreage was 2,955 with multiple structures involved in Chinese camp. So you can see that rapid fire growth that occurs later on this timeline from the beginning, right around that. If you go back one slide, please. Right around 12:58 p.m. That's also consistent with the second set of storm cells coming through. So when you have a thunderstorm cell that comes through over a wildfire specifically, the outflow winds are extremely erratic and unpredictable and can cause large fire growth in all directions. In fact, it's one of those situations that is a major concern on any wildland incident. This timeline can validate based on the rapid growth compared to the previous of when that cell was coming through the incident. Go ahead.
All right. So day one, the resources that were assigned. So at the close of the day, we had 31 crews totaling 502 people, 12 dozers with 24 people, 85 engines with 352 people, 35 water tenders with 70 folks, for a total of 163 resources for 948 personnel. Multiple resources of each type on order for immediate deployment following the operational period. So some summary, the unified command between CAL FIRE, Calaveras County Sheriff's Office, and Tuolumne County Sheriff's Office. At the end of the day, we had 4 fires that exceeded 1,000 acres. Fire Management Assistant Grant, FMAG, applications have been submitted for both the 2.7 and the 6.5. The 2.7 did get approved by FEMA. The 6.5 did not. The Type 1 CAL FIRE Incident Management Team had been ordered. Forward progress had been stopped on many of the incidents, and the 6.5 and the 2.7 remained the largest commitment of resources.
So before we go to the next 2 slides to go over the incident validated information and challenges, I'd like Captain Anzar, who's with us today, who was on the 6-5 fire specifically, being our only Chinese camp volunteer, to give a perspective from the volunteer that was actually there. As a chief officer in the incident command structure, being in Chinese camp, Nathan and I were both there later on as it was coming through Chinese camp, but we weren't at 6.5 at the initial. In addition to that, giving you a timeline overview from an elevated position is just that, and we really wanted Robert to be able to tell his experience as part of the presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Robert.
Good morning, board. My name is Robert Anzar. I am the only volunteer firefighter captain at Chinese camp. I have been with the department for 31 years. Started out as an explorer, and I've worked my way up through the ranks. That morning, volunteers, we have regular jobs. So that morning I came home from my regular job, and I saw a lot of lightning all over the place. I have a lightning app on my phone where I snapshot pictures of strikes for me to maybe check out areas later on that day if we have any sleepers. I got home at about a little bit before. Sorry about that. Anyways, I got home at about 6:30. Immediately switched my clothes and head straight to the station and got on the water tender, and I was immediately dispatched to the 2-2 fire down at Dunton and Highway 4. Went down to that fire. I couldn't believe the fire behavior at that time in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, and this thing's thousands of acres and it's ripping. And you don't normally see that early in the morning. Humidities are elevated. You don't see fire running like that in the grass. So worked on that fire. Once we got that thing corralled, while working that fire, I heard air attack pick up the smokes of the new fires starting over by the Red Hills. And that was alarming to me because history has shown in the Red Hills as a very volatile area for fire. Unlike other areas of the county, when the fuel moistures get to critical points in the Red Hills, they're extremely hard to control fire in that area. So I just wanted to make a point about that. So that was alarming to me, knowing what was going on. Down there on the 2-2 fire, we were experiencing at moments some extremely heavy winds, and those were thunder cells that were collapsing, and the outflow of winds, which was causing a huge problem down there for us to contain that grass fire. So later on that day, when we got the fire wrapped down there, I was at a location where I wasn't needed anymore, and I made that known to the IC. And knowing we had the stuff going on over in the Red Hills, I needed to get back to Chinese camp. So they immediately released me. I went through the command center, and they dispatched me back to Chinese camp. I got back to Chinese camp at about 14:30. And to take a look at what was going on, I swung by my fire station, took a look at everything, and I took some photos, some quick photos, and I saw that the fire was way out, still out beyond the first set of mountains going towards the Red Hills from my perspective, and didn't seem to be doing a whole lot. I made contact with the IC, told me to report down to 6-Bit Gulch and Red Hills Road, which I proceeded down. As I proceeded down, I got some more photos of where the fire was located at that time. Also, I'd like to know is I saw the sheriff deputies running around town, Code 3, going from house to house, alerting everybody that they needed to get out. Also, because of that, I ran my siren from the fire station all the way down to 6-Bit Gulch, which was all the way down Red Hills Road through town, to alert anybody that was out and about around their house. Maybe somebody's not paying attention to what's going on, and maybe they'll hear the siren, and it might make them look around that, hey, there's a fire, and it's getting close. So I ran my siren all the way down. I get down to 6-Bit Gulch. I get assigned down to the gun range to stand by. We had one engine on structure protection way out 6-Bit Gulch Road, way out past there's a gun range, way out there in the Red Hills. There's a house out there. There was a Sonora City engine out there doing structure protection. So I was told to stage there because I couldn't get down to that house due to the roads. So while I was there at the gun range, at about 3:30, a strike team from San Luis Obispo, CAL FIRE strike team, came in to the fire. And they were out kind of scoping around where we were going to deploy. And then we also had a dozer, a private hire dozer that showed up. And they were just starting to unload when the IC had gone out to scout around the fire and was over on the Chinese campsite and relayed to all of us that everybody get over to Chinese camp. The fire's starting to make a run towards town. All the strike team deployed over there, and then I had to stay behind because the Sonora City engine needed water. They had used up all their water protecting a house down there, so I hung back, filled them up, and then I immediately reported over into Chinese camp. While I was coming into the town of Chinese camp, I was starting to pick up traffic from aircraft overhead. Obviously, the fire had turned into from a perimeter control to life and safety priority. So all the engines of that strike team were deploying all over town, doing anything that they possibly could to protect any structures. The fire hit hard. There was a red barn across the street from the school, and it was fully involved. And it was just starting to jump the road, and there was a couple spots where I was going to try and pick it up to see if we can just hold it on one side of Red Hills. But with the winds, it was impossible. So I got scared thinking that maybe the fire station was burning in all of town. So I went through town, and I could barely make it through. There was power lines down everywhere, fire on both sides of the road. It was pretty intense. So I get through town, over to the fire station. The fire station's still standing. went over there, and it was a lot to take in. All of the old part of town was already gone. The winds were just erratic, super, super crazy wind. And there were a bunch of fire engines that saw me that were coming over that needed water. So as you guys know, Chinese Camp doesn't have any fire hydrants. There's no water system down there. The closest water we got is SPI, Ultra Power, and the Hatler Industrial Park for diesel turkey. So there's no water there in town. So when you're a water tender, you're a hot commodity. When things are going, they need water. So a bunch of fire engines actually came over to the fire station to get water, and I filled them. So I was able to step away for a moment, check things around the fire station, make that was secure, and shoot a few photos. After that, during that, there was a huge crack of lightning. So, in the middle of all this, we got like maybe new starts or somebody's going to get struck by lightning. So we got that also going on in the middle of all this. It was almost like the wrath of God was coming down. It was intense. So we stayed engaged. We went across the street. We were able to save the store, the post office, and then another house next to that we were able to save. But it was full on deployment. When I ran out of water, I had to go get water, and I had to run over to Hatler Industrial Park. I was going down 120, and the fire was burning all along 120. Had already jumped the road. We had multiple houses burning, basically from Chinese Camp to Sims Road. There was one time when I was driving through there, I couldn't see the road. It was so intense. Anyway, so getting back to town, after we were able to save those structures, PG&E was coming in, getting rid of the power lines for us because power lines came down all over town. It was impossible. You could not drive through town anymore. We had power lines down. We had transformers all over the place. So then, as this was all going on, we just continued to reevaluate other homes that had not burned and stayed engaged with that. Also, being a volunteer, when I was going to the first fire that morning, I was calling all our other volunteers that I could possibly get a hold of to go and report to their station and get on some equipment and tell command center that they're staffed and available. All of the other volunteers that I could get a hold of, they were all at work, and a lot of them could not leave their jobs. But right after the fire had hit Chinese Camp, a lot of these volunteers were able to get off work, which was about 4 o'clock. They were able to go, and I got 4 additional water tenders down there to Chinese Camp in the firefight. So I was real happy about that. We stayed engaged all night long, and just to let you know a little bit, when this started at 6:30 in the morning, I did 40 hours straight on the water tender. 40 hours I was engaged down there, fighting fire, hauling water. It was intense. Total, I did 11 days straight on the 6-5 fire alone. So I was engaged on that fire. After the first 40, I went to 12-hour shifts, and I was down there for 11 days total. And I just want to also point out, and I would like to thank SPI, I want to thank Ultra Power, I want to thank and Diesel Turkey Ranch. I want to thank those 3 for letting us use their water systems. As a note, Ultra Power, we depleted that first night. I think we went through about 100,000 gallons of water with all the water tenders rotating, hauling water out of there. That's a lot of water. They had to shut down their power operations because they didn't have enough water to make electricity anymore. And that next morning, after the initial 12 hours of the firefighting there in Chinese Camp, I contacted the staff at Ultra Power, and they're like, hey, we had to shut down. And I was like, geez, another casualty here of this whole incident. We need to get them back up and running. So they let me know. I ended up hauling 30,000 gallons of water alone just to them, just so they could get back up in power generation. So very thankful that they made a sacrifice themselves to shut down to keep us going with water. And then later on with the firefight, SPI was super helpful. They have water there at the sawmill there in Chinese camp, and they were allowing all the water tenders to come in there. So it greatly reduced the drive time, since Chinese camp has no water for us to get water into town. There was just one more other thing I just wanted to talk about. I just want to debunk some rumors. Okay, there was some. I'm on social media and I see what's going on out there. There was a rumor going around that somebody came over to the Chinese camp fire station and took the fire engine. That never happened. So I just want to really debunk that, because believe me, if somebody would have came over there that had no business getting on a fire engine, they probably would have went to jail. So that never happened, okay? There was a rumor that there was 4 fire engines sitting there at the fire station doing nothing. That's not true. All those 4 fire engines were coming over to find me to get water. So that was not true. So those fire engines were in the middle of the firefight. They had depleted their tanks, and they were coming over for me to refill. So anybody says that there were fire engines at the fire station doing nothing, that is not true at all. And then there was another rumor that was being spread that a volunteer that came up on our dispatch frequency said that they were told to stand down. Again, not true. There was no volunteer ever running around in their private vehicle in Chinese camp, and there was nobody ever told to stand down. It was all hands on deck. So just a little bit of that social media there. I just wanted to debunk some of that, because I kind of took offense to some of those. And so I just wanted to straighten that out. One more thing I'd just like to tell you, too, is, you know what? Our county has a history of fire. And believe it or not, there's a town called Stent, and that town burned down many, many years ago from a fire. So we all know the history of the fire in this county, and I just wanted to point that out. And I was here in 1996 when I was an explorer, when the Red Hills burned. And in 1996, we had a similar fire lightning outbreak, just like this, early in the morning. And that was the demise of the movie set for Back to the Future 3 in the Red Hills. Why we weren't sitting after that fire sitting around like we are today, we just didn't lose any structures other than the movie set that I know of during that siege. We got really lucky on that one. So that was back in 1996. So anyways, other than that, I just also want to point out, if after the aftermath, you go through town. Now, believe me, my heart sank when I came into town and you saw everything burning. When I saw all those buildings burning, the history, I'm a history buff. You know, Chinese camp reminded me of Bodie. But the town was overgrown. A lot of all those old buildings, it was just completely overgrown, and they weren't taken care of. It was just an arrested state of decay was the town, basically the old part of the 1800 buildings. But there was no upkeep whatsoever of that. The towns that the homes that made it, that you saw out there today, it was because they had clearance. That was the big thing. This is what it comes down to. Having that clearance was huge, huge. I mean, obviously, look at the fire burned all the way around the fire station. And the fire station, because everything was cleared around the fire station. So I just wanted to point those out. And the church, the 1854 Catholic Church is still standing because they had bare mineral soil all around that place. It was completely been upkept. So anyways, other than that, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. That was very comprehensive. So getting into 6-5 incident validated information. The fire was dispatched at 10:32 a.m. and was the 15th fire dispatch of the day on September 2nd, with 6 more fire dispatches occurring after. A CAL FIRE utility 4456 went en route at the time of the dispatch and was attempting to make access in the area at 10:55 a.m. Access was difficult due to the location in the Red Hills Wildlife Area, and access was made by the first arriving resource at 11:15 a.m. Resources at scene of the incident engaged in fire attack prior to the immediate structure threat at 3:12 p.m. One utility with overhead staff, 7 fire engines, and 1 Tuolumne County water tender. The additional resources sent to the incident to support the resource request for structure defense was 1 additional CAL FIRE engine, which my understanding was the last state engine in the unit, and 2 Tuolumne County Fire Department engines, 761 and 513. So I want to talk about the resources really quick and the outline there. If you go back to the slide that Chief Bohal talked about with 85 engines committed to the entire complex in the first 24 hours, you look at roughly 10 of those engines being assigned to the 6-5. Spread 85 out through 21 fires. You look at an average, if everybody had the same, would be about 4 engines. This incident, even prior to getting in Chinese camp, had the priority for the engines coming into the unit. The other thing that Robert talked about was the CAL FIRE resources coming in was the San Luis Obispo engine strike team, which is 5 CAL FIRE engines and a leader. That should tell you just how depleted our surrounding areas were with commitments of their own resources, because we had that distance of a resource coming in to help us was the soonest resource we could get. With Madera Mariposa having over 5,000 acres with their resources committed, and Amador El Dorado with 8 fires, when we hit the engine orders to get additional assistance, it is coming from extended distances. And that's a really good thing to point out as far as having an understanding of the amount of drive time it took to get those engines here to where they could actually engage with San Luis Obispo. Hold on, go back. Okay, sorry. Next slide. So some other validated information continued. The Columbia Air Attack Base delivered a total of 140,200 gallons of retardant in a single day on September 2nd. That is a record amount for the Columbia Air Attack Base history. And for proximity, that equates roughly to 140 landings and 140 takeoffs in one day. So I bring that up is pulling 10-year data from what we'll call a CAL FIRE S2 base. So Columbia has a short runway, which means it can only support our S2 fleet that we have. Our very large air tankers come out of Fresno and they come out of McClellan. So that retardant was delivered through the S2s. In comparison, in the last 10 years, the most gallons to be pumped at a CAL FIRE S2 base was just over 90,000 gallons. So our Columbia Air Attack Base, not only for the base history, but also what they were able to deliver to that fire just out of our base was nothing short of amazing. I really want to give a lot of credit to that. And it also shows just how crucial the Columbia Air Attack Base is to our operations in Tuolumne County. The total fire retardant dropped on the 6-5 was 63,869 gallons. The Columbia Air Attack Base, in addition to the amount of gallons of retardant that they pumped and supported, they also supported 12 helicopters, 10 air tankers, and 5 separate air attacks during the duration of the incident. And additional resources were sent to the 6-5 as a priority as they arrived in the unit, but a large number of those resources arrived after the initial impact to Chinese camp. And Supervisor Griefer, I think you and I talked after that initial impact as night was coming and you were out on the line, you could see those engines that had come in. Unfortunately, it was just their travel time was later than when the fire impacts were. So lastly, challenges. I could have 2 pages of successes for this incident, but that's not why you asked me here today. But before I go into challenges, I would be remiss if I didn't give acknowledgement to the fire department staff and our public service staff, whether it be sheriff and OES, for just how much they accomplished through this incident with their determination and hard work. And I think Robert's story of that day specifically outlines just how appreciative we are for what these folks and the boots on the ground actually do. Nothing is going to make it better that there was structure loss in Chinese camp. But the determination of these folks is why there wasn't structure loss anywhere else in 4 different counties with 21 different fires. And I just want to acknowledge that before we go into the challenges, that the line staff, whether it be local government, CAL FIRE, Forest Service, volunteer, paid, is nothing short of phenomenal in what they were able to do on this day. And I'm really proud of every single one of them. So getting into challenges. Total volume of statewide fire activity was limiting the available resources, including neighboring counties. That was a huge, huge impact to us, not being able to draw on our closest resources to come into the unit to help us out with the amount of fire that we had, due to the fact that they had their own fires that they were fighting. I do want to compliment both counties to the north and south of us, because as those fires got caught, those engines came in. It was the next day, and it supported the operations through the rest of the incident. But on the initial day, there wasn't anybody coming to help us in the immediate. We were on our own until we could get the distant resources coming in. The large number of fires with resource needs at the same time within the unit. You have two competing incidents with fire moving out, one with immediate structure threat and one that hits a structure threat 30 minutes later. With rapid fire growth, that's extremely challenging to be able to support both of those, being the 2-7 and the 6-5. The second wave of thunderstorm weather and erratic outflow winds influencing the rapid fire spread on the 6-5. The thunderstorm and the outflow winds and that rapid fire growth are all linked together specifically. When you look at these variables that are all coming together and looking at it as part of the complex, it really changes the view of just all of the impacts it had versus looking at the incident as a standalone fire on what I would call a normal weather day, where you have a normal prevailing wind and you have resources that are there in the normal capacity at our normal staffing levels without the other incidents. So the thunder cell activity and that fire growth in that 3 hours, when it went from 200 acres to, it's just shy of 3,000, just shows how fast something can move. Supporting all fires within minimum resources to limit controlled or continued threat to communities. In Copperopolis, just on the other side of the county line, we had stripped those fires down to what we call a skeleton crew. We had the 2-8 that I think was north of over 1,000 acres. That was largely 2 engines, a dozer, and somebody in a pickup, trying to do everything they could to make sure that it didn't come into Copperopolis. The 2-4, I believe it was another one that went down to 1 hand crew that night, just so they could ensure that the fire didn't have an ultimate unattended presence, but essentially taking very limiting mitigation factors because we needed those resources to go to fires like the 6-5. The ability to support current fire incidents while also planning for additional fires not yet detected. That's another great point is 15th fire of the day, 6 more to follow, and how many more do we have that we don't know about? When you look in hindsight, we know we had 21, but that day we didn't know how many we had or how many we were going to have. So we have to plan not only for the incidents that we have, but the incidents that we're getting, and we're doing that with the variables of knowing resources are extremely slim. And that goes into the last bullet point of command and control planning of available resources for the rapidly expanding fire potential into populated areas, as well as routine type emergency calls. And the 6-5 devastated Chinese camp at a level that, like I think Robert said it best, just made him sick. But that fire didn't stop in Chinese camp. That fire kept going. And there was a huge operational consideration that where it was established is where we're looking at a threat to potential Jamestown later. And I can tell you, with my incident command background, my operational background, this is one of those very few times in my career where you are faced with the reality that when it comes to life, property, and environment, you actually have to triage what you can control. And there were times on the incident where the only thing that we could control was trying to keep people safe. That was the only thing we had the ability. And when you have to explain that to your staff to actually simplify it so that we can be effective, it's extremely challenging, but it's the truth. It happens very rarely. This is one of those times that those are the conversations we were having to try to limit the amount of damage. And the fact that no one was killed on this fire, I think, is a true testament to the fact of what our folks were able to do. So I want to make sure that that's acknowledged and really commend the staff and, again, our cooperators with the Sheriff's Department and OES. So with that, that's the end of our presentation. We'll turn it back over to the board.
Great, thank you. And I appreciate the presentation and all of the information, especially that we have this recorded. Folks will be able to watch it afterwards and be able to get the full incident feedback or all the updates there. So thank you for sharing. And Robert, thank you too for the take. I know that's difficult, and it was scary, enormous, the scope of that to see it, and then I can only imagine being on it for then 11 more days, you and the rest of the team. Just thank you for what you're doing. So we'll bring it back to the board for any questions and for any comments. believe Supervisor Griefer mentioned that he'd like to speak after the rest of the board's made comments as well. So looking to Supervisors Holland, Supervisor Campbell. Supervisor Campbell.
Thank you, Chiefs. So, these are discussions that we've had internally or at the Fire Safety Advisory Committee. But I especially want to highlight, Chief Anzar, the story you shared of how it went down from your perspective. I had never really heard it from you directly, and I think it really highlights the chaotic nature of these types of incidents. And I mean, I really cannot thank you enough about the personal risks you took and the efforts that you made to help fight the fire in its early stages and get the word out that we needed help in Jennings Camp. So I really hope people take to heart what you said and that you're the one that was there and a lot of us came afterward. And so the question I have is kind of related to, so if we were to, what would we do differently in the future? The saying in OES circles is never waste a tragedy. And so we've learned from this. We can change our operations, change our communication practices. What can we learn from this, or is it too soon to say how we can take the lessons of the 6.5 fire and apply them to future efforts going forward in county fire suppression?
It's a tough question to answer based on all of the not normal circumstances on an incident like this, right? So when you're faced with all of the different variables that are impactful to this incident, it makes it challenging to really pin down specifically what you would change differently because it's in hindsight. And so if you look through the lens of the time in which it's happening, it makes it tough. So I think there's a few things is if we're really looking at it, whether it be this fire or any fire, is our ability to support our operational area coordination with our local government partners, and any adjustments we can do there to support not only the needs of an expanding incident, but also the needs of their districts to work collaboratively, I think is a plus there. And there have been some discussions with the Fire Chiefs Association on that specific topic. Outside of that, I think that the education for defensible space inspections, which I cannot say, and I'm not saying that that is the only variable, but it's one that we can actually make tangible. And education to the public, but more so than that is what's available to support residents that aren't able to complete their defensible space requirements. What grants are out there that can be supported to assist with that so that the defensible space can be done for those that can't do it for themselves. I think those are two immediates on the response and on the preparatory side, in addition to outreach to the public, that could help in the future.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And what I'm kind of looking at is that, we have often said that we are, for many years, this county was below what I would consider the bare minimum in terms of fire protection resources. The number of engines, the number of personnel that we had to fight incidents. It was kind of highlighted during, going way back to the rim fire, these types of things, where it was very clear that we were vulnerable as a community to these types of incidents. So a lot of work and a lot of effort has come into shoring up sort of those resources and making sure that we are, I feel that we are at the bare minimum for those resources. But even at that level, though, if we have an event like this that just overwhelms our system, is it possible to have enough resources to be able to adequately combat a complex fire of this type, or is that just not something that's possible? I mean, we were talking about multiple dozens of ignitions and thousands of lightning strikes. What should be our goal here in terms of the response going forward?
In working on statewide resource capabilities for the department being CAL FIRE, and understanding your question pretty comprehensively, you'd have to make that correlation to the 280 to 300 fires that we run a year that are not part of an anomaly weather event that was unpredicted, that turned into what I would call a conflagration, where your fuel type essentially becomes structures. You'd have to look at it based on those numbers, not the once every 30-year event. Those are really hard to plan for. I'm not sure we can plan for a once every 30-year event and have complete success like we've tried to, right? But I would say that all the measures that show on the other fires is to maintain at least what we have to support what you're saying.
I'll save it to listen to the questions of my colleagues.
Thank you. Supervisor Holland.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, I got some questions. Can we go to slide 9? I think it's slide 9. I got the number right. Yeah, that one. One of the chiefs, whoever. Where's 5-4 at up there on that map? I can't see it. Well, I see it, but I'm asking, where is it? Where is that? Geographically. There we go. Oh, that's the one in Cedar Ridge? And 5-3, is that the one that was down here above town?
That was 5-2. 5-2. And, sorry, into the microphone, please.
5-2 was right above the cemetery, north side of Lionsball Mountain Road.
Okay, and 5-3 would be, where was 5-3 at?
Another strike up there to the east of there. Some of those were going to be your smaller ones.
Okay, somewhere between here and Cedar Ridge on the backside there. Okay. But you said 5-4 was a federal fire, or no? I heard something say about one of them.
No, the federal fire, so remember, we're just identifying the stuff that was in our jurisdiction. Okay. There was the Cedar fire, which was a risk for us, just sitting below the community of Cedar Ridge, approximately 600 feet from the direct protection area line between the Stanislaus National Forest and CAL FIRE's jurisdiction.
Okay, so we had one on our side and one on the federal side. Okay, I was trying. Okay, that's not the federal side's not on the map then.
No, it's not. But the federal fire was approximately 800 feet from what we call the direct protection boundary. So it was a definite concern of becoming an issue for us as well.
Okay.
In a higher populated area with heavier fuels.
Okay, and the feds responded eventually at some point?
They did a fantastic job. I can't thank Beck and her staff on the Stanislaus for their aggressive approach on that. In addition, also helping us on other fires as the days went out into the McKay's area.
Okay, and then if we go to slide 14, thanks for clarifying that. I think it's 14. Okay, so maybe go back one, Nathan. It's one before there. Okay, maybe it's this one here, 13. So when you guys, I was writing some math here. So it looks like when the time it got called in the fire, Chinese it looked like every 30 minutes that fire was tripling and quadrupling if you do the math and you extrapolate it out at a pretty consistent rate of multiplication. So what resources did we actually have on the ground at what time? Because I know you guys said something about utility. I didn't know what utility 4, 4, 5, 6 even is. So maybe you can enlighten us.
So again, 15th fire dispatch of the day, and I'm going to trust your math on that because I know you're really good at it. So, but yeah, so the resources that we sent were what was available, being the 15th fire dispatch of the day, which was a fire captain in a utility vehicle, which is a code 3 pickup, to go out and basically assess what we have. Okay, and then from there, the resource orders that they placed were being pulled from the existing resources we had in the unit to go and support that.
Okay. So like at, I don't know, 12 o'clock or somewhere in there, we just had a pickup truck watching it is what we were doing? I guess I'm trying to get further like what we had on, because I know some on the slides that said what resources that were requested. Did we actually have the resources? Because something's requested doesn't mean it's actually there. Maybe that's the slide.
Yeah, so the 7 engines that were at scene prior to 312, and I don't have the in front of me the time that the strike team came in, but essentially we had 2 engines that were out there prior to the 5 coming in, which is what we had at the time. So it's important to understand that It's not that we had a bunch of wildland fire-specific engines we weren't sending out there. It was what we had the ability to send, specific to that mission.
Okay, so from noon to 3 o'clock, is that when the strike team rolled in, you said? 3:12?
It's contradicting what Robert's remembering was, so I don't have the exact on when the strike team got there, but I could tell you from the validated radio information that we have is they were there before 3:12 p.m.
I'm assuming they radio and like, hey, we're here. Where do you want us to
They
go?
go out seeing, correct.
Okay. So for that 3 hours, we just had the utility truck watching the fire spreading slowly.
There's a dozer there as well.
Okay.
So,
Where were they deployed, like actually cutting line?
yeah, the Red Hills poses a challenge because it's remote, right? So as far as to give you a line-by-line tactical of what they did on the incident, like I don't have that for you. I can't tell you what their operational decisions were. I can just tell you what resources were there and where they were engaged or what their attempts were.
Because I know that's what people have questions about. They're going like, hey, what do we have down there? You know, if we have, first time I've heard the city of Sonora came down and helped, which that's wonderful. I will congratulate them when I see them. So if they're down there doing fire protection, where was our Tuolumne County trucks at? Were they,
Sure.
I think that's what people are trying to ask is like, where's the truck sitting here? Do we have a truck out here? Like, you know, if the city of Sonora's down there was Chicken Ranch deployed out there, like where were all the different?
Yeah, I'm not going to
It
speak.
sounds like,
I'm not going to speak to local government fire departments that aren't in my jurisdiction on their locations or what they were doing. I think that's a question for those chiefs. But as far as our resources specifically, for that fire and that dispatch, a Type 1 engine that predominantly has limitations off-road isn't going to be effective in the Red Hills Wildlife
But
Area.
you guys dispatch them, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So we should know where they're at.
No, I know exactly where they were, but I'm telling you specifically to this is did not respond to the Red Hills Wildlife Refuge for a wildland fire that they couldn't drive to.
No, but the city of Sonora got there.
They were in their Type 6 engine that is a wildland engine, like additional engine
gotcha.
staffed up, to clarify.
Okay. I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out is where all of our trucks were, where they weren't, were like, you know, and I understand there's
Sure.
multiple fires going on, so I mean, we need them different places, but I think that's what, I think the people at Chinese Camp and District 1, you know, the citizens kind of want to know, like, well, you know, what are we doing so we can plan ahead, right? Because nothing's going to change the house is burned down. I mean, nothing will change that fact now.
Sure.
So how do we look at this different? Could we done something different? And it's a learning opportunity, right? Because you can always do something better. And were we dropping fire retardant on that fire between 12 and 3?
I don't have the timelines for the fire. So again, if we go back to the no divert on the 2-7 30 minutes before this one, we have the total numbers of retardant drop, which they track, but I don't have the exact timelines on which they dropped that retardant. So it's going to be in priority based on life and property. And at the time where this fire was specifically, it was not threatening life or property. It was in the Red Hills Wildlife Area. So on a normal day, we would have had aircraft over it, and we would have probably beat it up the best that we could. But in the circumstances specifically, it was based off, and I'm trying to do a good job of articulating this to you, but it's not a sole incident. It's one setting. So
Yeah, there's fires all over the place. I get it, right? Multiple counties, everything's on fire. I think that's what we're trying to figure out is where everything was. Like, because if I'm understanding it right, we sound like we didn't get resources down there until actually literally the town was on fire, per se. We didn't really have like a sniffigant or a natural fire truck down there. Because Robert sounded like you didn't get back to like 4 o'clock or something.
Well, no,
And we need the microphone, Chief. Thank you.
The strike team of engines that came in from San Luis was about 3:30. And then the IC went over around to the Chinese campsite to scope out to get a better vantage point of what the fire was doing. And then we had a cell come over with erratic winds that blew the fire out of the hills and into town. And immediately, when that was taking place, the strike team of engines were sent over to Chinese campsite to start protecting any and all structures that they possibly could.
And is the IC, is that the utility truck? Just so I understand.
Correct.
Okay. So they're the ones that are in charge of like watching it or assessing it or whatever?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess this is what I'm trying to get at is like, if we got a fire that's growing for hours at a triple to quadruple rate every 30 minutes, do we just have zero? There was just nothing, or was it all just averted other places? Because I mean, it seems like that went for hours of just this constant, you know, they're radioing in that the size of it, you could do the simple math, it's growing at that rate, that we didn't have anything down there till 3:30. And I think evacuations, the sheriff's here, maybe they can, I mean, I know I was in a meeting at 2:30, I think, with them, or 2 o'clock, and they left here to head down there. So I don't know when evacuation started, but I'm assuming we're evacuating because the town's getting ready to burn down, or in threat of burning down. I mean, I've heard different variations, but.
Dave Vasquez, Sheriff of Tuolumne County. I hear the question is approximately what time did evacuation start? One of our first deputy sheriffs down there was approximately shortly after 1300 hours, arrived at Chinese Camp School to coordinate with the school administration there, and evacuation warnings and orders proceeded after those hours, based on a collaborative effort from the IC for the 6-5 fire and I believe Sergeant Richard Donaldson at the time, who was our supervisor on scene. So around that time, warnings and orders, combination of both.
So with your deputies on site, then when do we actually have fire, like reaching structures, I guess, at Chinese camp? Do you know? Approximate.
I can tell you right now that the depiction from Captain Anzar and the chiefs is consistent with what I experienced. I actually think that Mr. Anzar came at it with a bit of humility, because I watched him try to fight that fire on Main Street. He skipped over that, but I did watch him single-handedly try to put water on that fire as we followed out conducting evacuations. Shortly thereafter, we did receive radio traffic from a supervisor that said, I need basically every cop down here right now for evacuation orders. The timeline aligns with this presentation as I experienced it, so I don't know the exact time when it hit Main Street and started burning structures, but I do know I watched that man try to put water on it while both sides of the road were on fire, and we navigated our way to get out of there. We did end up evacuating more people who refused to leave during the initial evacuation orders, and so it was a very dynamic situation. But as far as exact time when those flames hit structure, I couldn't tell you that right now, but we could definitely look at our radio traffic from deputy sheriffs and body cam footage and have that for you. But the timelines check out. First deputy sheriff there about 13:30 hours, and then preceding evacuation orders all up until there was structure loss.
Okay. So I would assume 3-ish, 3:30-ish, somewhere in there, that buildings are on fire, it sounds like.
Microphone, please. Thank you.
Sorry, about 3:45.
Okay. If we had a water source down there, I'm assuming this would have made a big difference. If we just even had a single hydrant someplace you could fill up.
Yeah, any sort of a municipal water supply would have been a huge help. If the county is ever future planning, they need to put water down in Chinese camp.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same question we have about the resorts up in Groveland. That's a long ways from Groveland to a water source.
Yep, it's the turnaround times. That's why we have water tenders.
Yeah, I see you fill up a lot, so I know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, we have 5 of them, and it's that time, the reflex time we call it, to haul water to a fire. And once you get to the fire and you empty there and then go back to the hydrant, and it's that cycle time. And having SPI and Ultra Power close by instead of coming all the way back up to Jamestown really made a huge difference for us to get water to the fire as fast as we could.
Okay. I'll let you ask questions. Or Jaron, sorry.
I had a few, and then, okay.
Thank you. You guys.
Thank you. Yeah, and appreciate it. I know that there wasn't a municipal source down there. That would be something in the future. I mean, even a Purple Pipe District with JSD would be fantastic for the area. But wanted to check, so with the water tenders, are those the ones that were located within the county that have been kind of part of that replacement schedule we've been doing for the last 5 years?
Yes.
Okay, and did we have any apparent equipment failures on any of the engines or stuff that went down? Because I know that's been a priority, that we had a lot that were frankly old and unreliable.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Wanted to ask, this might be a question for the sheriff, so I can jump to the next one, but one of the challenges we have in an evacuation too is that people refuse to leave. Certainly when it enters structures, that's going to be putting your crews and the sheriff's crews in a very difficult position of, yes, somebody is taking responsibility for their own life in a way, and yet putting first responders in an impossible spot of trying to save somebody that doesn't want to be saved, and putting others at risk. Do we have numbers on how many refused to evacuate? All right, I tried to give you a warning. There you go.
That's okay. I plan on making some comments just generically as an overall approach to gratitude, but specifically for your question, we do know exactly how many people, based on the records of people that we can make contact with. I did not bring refusal data here today. I wasn't prepared to speak on the folks that didn't evacuate, but we do have that information. So if you want those numbers, I can absolutely have those forwarded to you very easily.
Okay. Do we
But
have
there were many.
an estimate of it might have been a quarter of the homeowner? I mean,
I'll tell you this, more than 10.
okay.
That's for sure. And again, everybody has different means, right? So when we talk about people who are refusing to evacuate, it's their constitutional right to remain in their person, place, and papers. That includes their homes. We do force children, obviously, out of the area. But I think it's a good opportunity to highlight that aside from the partnership of all the first responders, there's a lot of community members and families that live down in that area that were also actively involved in taking protective measures that didn't leave. And so we take that into consideration when we compile that data as a functional refusal as opposed to somebody who's posing a liability, because I do not in any way want to claim that everybody who doesn't leave is part of the problem. Sometimes, and I think in many cases when community members have lived this before and this is not their first rodeo, I think of a handful of names, Sinclair, Moyle, Geyser, all of Van Dykhausen, all the families that started trying to take protection efforts also to help the mission. Those are all people who may or may not have left, but they did it because they want to protect property, and that's their right to do so. And so I just offer that folks that refuse to leave, that become a later liability, can put first responders at risk. The ones that have a higher degree of expertise on how to protect land and their property, sometimes that's a blessing in disguise. So again, it's about balance and it's about the totality of the circumstances. But I echo the chief's sentiment about gratitude at this team partnership. That day, the first phone call I got was from Chief Gorham about 10:30 saying, it's going to get interesting, so just be ready, and kind of gave us a layout. So like I said, the timeline reigns true to that. It's the partnership. It's everybody.
And I guess what I wanted to get at is mention the order to prioritize and triage protecting people, where you may have people who were refusing. Let's say these are not the folks who are out on their own dozer carving a line around their property,
That's
but
right.
these are the folks who are just in their house, otherwise not maybe taking a step to do that or capable of doing that. How does that interact between the two, where they do have the right to stay, but then life is prioritized? Was that pulling engines or equipment or anything off to go protect somebody that was in a house where they refused to leave? Do we know that happened? Or
As I went through the radio traffic data to provide you this presentation,
Thank you.
I did not have any specific radio traffic that was garnished that would have supported what you're saying about pulling a resource away from a mission to support somebody who wasn't going to leave.
Okay, good.
So now with that, it was also an extremely busy radio day. So I can't 100% validate that on the incident that didn't happen, but at least to our level, that was never communicated that there was any hindrance. Usually with folks refusing to leave, it comes into, as long, it's their choice. We leave that up to the sheriff with his jurisdiction. It only becomes an issue for us as if they're going to start impeding our ability to do the mission of fighting the fire. Then that turns into something else. But not to my understanding, did that occur on this?
The chief makes a great point, and it kind of comes along the line of the follow-up. We do robust education about folks that refuse to leave, and refuse to heed the warnings and orders, as it does rest within my jurisdiction. And it would not be my support of the mission to relay information of people who are knowingly putting themselves at risk to sway the decision-making of the unified command making those decisions, because we are looking at a very broad spectrum. And to submit to that type of data of somebody who's refusing to leave to attempt to change what those decisions may or may not be could be detrimental to public safety as a whole. So
Absolutely.
that would be my focus.
Great, thank you. One as to, and as I think, as mentioned by Captain Azar, the defensible space issue, and I think that is a bit of an elephant in the room of it. It's well known that Chinese camp was very overgrown in a lot of these sections too. It's not to say that that was deserved or something. There's a lot of areas of the county that have that issue. How would you, with the fire as it kind of proceeded as the resource availability, again, this being kind of an aberrant event, had a defensible space ordinance been implemented, those properties were inspected, they had the ground zero clearance, they had the 100-foot, it was in, if not repair order, at least fire safety order as it should have been do you think that the outcome would have been different in terms of a lot of the property or the speed of the fire?
Well, first, the priority for defensible space under Public Resource Code 4291 lies with the state. So the county ordinance, although has been adopted of the same standard as the state, it's the state's responsibility for those inspections. So we roughly have 6 inspectors, 2 full-time, 4 that work about 8 months out of the year, that go, what they try to do a 3-year rotation of inspections because we're responsible for multiple counties of doing those inspections. The last time we did inspections in Chinese camp for transparency was 2021. So that goal of 3 years is not a mandate. It's not written. It's a unit goal that we try so that each area of both counties can have some representation. But 2021 was the last time that Chinese camp had defensible space inspections. Going back to what I said earlier, doesn't mean that if you don't have an inspection that you can't comply, but then it comes to the means to be able to do so. And then what mechanisms are out there to support the folks that can't maintain their own defensible space for whatever limiting reasons they may have. As far as would it have made an impact on this incident or not, I think that by saying yes or no and not taking into account the other variables and the wind and all those other things, it's really tough to say. But what I will tell you is on major conflagration events or major wildland fires where there aren't enough fire engines, the preventative measures coupled with a response always will have a better outcome than either one standalone. So I would say that defensible space, specifically in that compliance with 4291, is something that should be sought after everywhere in the county. That is the mitigating factor that a homeowner can do to help limit the ability of a fire to burn their house down.
Great. And with 4291, with the inspectors on hand, I know there's been discussions on more inspectors, but just working with what we have, since they did go through and do an inspection there, presumably several properties were going to be out of compliance with that. What does that look like? Is there a lesson learned there of where somebody isn't preemptively doing it on their own, and where that education may not have led to the person going and doing it? I know that there would be some examples of folks who just cannot do it on their own financially or physically. I suspect there may have been others who were folks who held property there that might have had the financial means. What lesson learned there of how when we do these inspections, we make sure that there's teeth enough it actually ends up with a safer property standard?
So for CAL FIRE, when we do inspections, we really approach it from an educational standpoint.
Right.
Usually it's folks not understanding what needs to be done, and once they're educated on it, then they really want to do it, right? Or maybe not want to, but they understand and they do it to comply. When we get to second inspections on re-inspections and there's no compliance and there's no effort, that's when we start going down more in the enforcement category, which can be a citation issued for noncompliance. But typically, the way that our defensible space inspectors approach this is if someone is attempting to make the improvements on the inspection from the first time to get to compliance, we will work with them on their dates to do so. Really, the teeth comes from the person that chooses not to do anything. And then it becomes more of a citation issue and becomes a matter of that.
Okay. I know we have other mutual aid contracts with, I think OES has been working on this, some of the agencies around that have different equipment, different from automatic aid from fire. Specifically, I was thinking dozers and that type of equipment, and it was overhead, mentioned the utility trucks. Were any of those activated that we're aware of where some of these other partners with either equipment or expertise or personnel, even a law enforcement thinking, say, state parks, and I mean ones that are not the traditional core group, are we aware of those being on site? I know I had on there somewhere 2 private hired dozers.
Yeah. So to give some context to when we say private hire, so the state has a emergency assistance agreement for private equipment, whether it be dozers, water tenders, et cetera, that we have a list that we go to of vendors that are signed up with the proper credentialed training as well as equipment that's certified, and they support us statewide on fires year-round. A lot of our local vendors here, referred to as a vendor, are either logging companies or other companies that own equipment, and they sign up with us. And so what's called the HIM system is a system for dispatch in which that we go in when the dozer order comes through, and we go to our vendors in the closest area, like Tuolumne County, and who's available, and then they are paid by the state for the state mission to come and fight fire. And Kevin, I don't know if you want to expand on hired equipment at all, but I can turn it to you.
Well, and that's fine, I think, for the dozers. I'm more wondering about under any other type of agency. Again, we have other public agencies, the utility districts, for example, that they do have equipment where we're talking about not on the edge of the fire, but something preemptive. This was something I was wondering about where we think it could even remotely threaten a community. there's not enough equipment around, there's a lot of fires happening. What is our process of trying to activate, hey, George Reed, are you able to bring out extra dozers that maybe aren't even, hired? Or Tuolumne Utilities District, do you have any equipment that can come out and help cut a line?
Yeah, so we have done that before. I mean, you could leverage local things immediately, but we also do EERAs, so essentially it's an emergency hire. They may not even have fire training if we're not utilizing them for direct fire line.
Right.
We can utilize resources for things along those lines, and we've actually done that quite a bit. 2020, 2021, when we actually exhausted the hired equipment list, we were doing that across the state for areas that we didn't have folks doing direct fire line.
Okay, so one with that, we had 2 hired dozers on this. There was that period of time where before I think really all the fire equipment, other fires are kind of getting mopped up. What would be, what's the reason not to, for lack of keeping it simple, hire every single dozer that's in the county to come down and cut preventative lines the moment we would send a text and be like, hey, I think this could be very complicated. We may not have enough resources with the others. Why would there only be 2 instead of, say, 4?
Yeah, so we did hire local dozers, local operators that were being impacted in the area. They show up.
The 2?
No, those 2 were ones that we had actually hired for other, so we can hire them through our hired equipment list. There's other dozers that we hired during the event that were out there that were available to work. If there's CAL FIRE supervision or some sort of supervisor and we can put them to work safely, we'll hire them. We'll do an AER on the spot, which did happen on that weren't counted in the numbers that we're giving you.
Do we have numbers on that?
I would have to look into that. I don't have it here with me.
Okay. And again, just thinking of lessons, if we have the ability, there's other local response equipment, again, not in any fire direct interaction or threat, are we able to bring somebody out to go cut a bulldoze line, all around a neighborhood or a community? Is that something that could have been quicker? Was it a budgetary constraint statewide to be able to pay for it? Is it an approval process? Is there anything that stops the chief on the spot from saying, hey, George Reed, again, just as a big example there, or James Center or whatever, bring everything here, bring all your equipment, and we're going to use, I forget what they call it in disaster response, but the incidental volunteers or whatever that kind of come up and show up to the shelter and want to go help out. The same thing, but for equipment. What would be, is there any limiting factors in that? Is there something that can make that a little faster in the future?
A lot of it would be just skill and safety. Making sure you have people out there that aren't going to endanger other folks' lives, just like the citizens that are protecting their property. Absolutely, if we have somebody who has a farmhouse or corrals or something that they have a value and they're going to protect their own or their own ownership, obviously we're going to support that if it's not impeding the fire operation. We're going to do the same thing here. And when it comes to budget constraints, that wouldn't be the constraint. It would be somebody who has the skill level that we can trust to be out there working. Same idea. And I was going to go back kind of to where you were coming from. One of the best things that we can do for structure defense is perimeter control. So prior to the event that pushed fire down towards Chinese camp, we were doing perimeter control where we could. We did have a couple engines up there with them doing that. But until there's actually going to be a threat to a community, we don't necessarily go throw a retardant, dozer line, and everything in front of that community. Right. And the fire never gets there or isn't anticipated. Prior to that weather event, we did not anticipate fire to go into that community.
Okay, great, thank you. And just one last question on this, turn it over. So the Unified Command Station was in Calaveras, is that correct?
The incident base camp?
Yeah. And so there were, because this was one that was just, it was all termed the Lightning Complex, and it was from the same storm. Obviously, ones like I think it was 6.2, 6.5 were very close. Even within Tuolumne County, there's an argument there. But being combined with ones that were over a pretty significant barrier with reservoir and river, I wanted to ask, when is a decision like that made to say these fires are all in the same thing, and we're going to put the incident base command in that county, as opposed to having it, 2 centers set up within different areas? There's a lot of confusion about where it was then termed Lightning Complex, and it jumped from, I think, 7,000 to 14,000, and having to explain, well, okay, it's actually these fires are all grouped in now. We're not using the numbers anymore. It's got this term. So how's that decision made? Like, when is that base command decision made?
So the decision to enter into a complex incident organization and become a complex is based off of the fires exceeding the ability to individually manage each other without conflicting or becoming so big that they're competing. And so by being under a complex incident organization, you now have one resource ordering point that has one operations that's prioritizing resources to each fire. One isn't going to take away from the other on anything other than specific criteria like a life threat, right, or those that are impacting structures. The Calaveras Base Camp has been a point of contention, not that you're presenting it like it is, but in my tenure here, I can remember several board members that did not like that the base camp was at Frogtown. And to be very frank with you, the fact that Calaveras County had fires had really no bearing on us using Frogtown. It's that it is a large enough fairgrounds to accommodate a large number of people. So it's one restriction we have in the Tuolumne Calaveras unit is our base camp locations. We've used mother load it's probably been like maybe, I want to say over 10 years. But it's not big enough, and it has major traffic issues for all of the equipment we have. So when we're looking at 2,000 people, and you have to have 30 bulldozers and transports lined up, and you have over 150 fire engines that are coming in, and all those types of things, there's very few places that have a footprint that can support it. So one of the things we've done in the past that we still strive to do when we have an incident management team is to set up cooperator meetings in the county specific, if it's not where the base camp location is, so that the travel doesn't become an issue. It really becomes an issue for our folks. The Sheriff's Department's a great example that has to travel to certain specific meetings to integrate in the unified command, and it is inconvenient, we acknowledge that, but ultimately we're just bound by size. If there was a location in Tuolumne County that could support it, we'd be happy to sign it up under an emergency lease agreement so that we could use it in the future.
So something of this scale exceeds what an EOC could basically handle within our area, but it also exceeds what the fairgrounds might be able to handle in terms of the amount of just people and...
Yeah, your EOC is a little separate of an operation. They're more handling the county functions. So if we take EOC and separate it from incident operations, the incident operations is what needs that big footprint that you would find at the fairgrounds.
Okay.
And Motherlo's just not big enough.
And so if we wanted to plan for that, we would need because I know it's much smaller, it's kind of geographically locked, it's obviously got the one point of access. We would need, for ideal response to that, a new facility of some type that could handle that type of an event.
Yeah,
if we wanted to bring that over.
A different location, yeah, for sure.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Supervisor Griefer?
Thank you. I wanted to go last because I wanted my partners to ask their questions that were important to them. I know a lot of these discussion points are important to everybody, and especially since I represent the affected area. I wanted to make sure that I was able to take in everything, and I want to say first and foremost, I appreciate not only what you guys did the day of, but everything you've been doing since. We've had a lot of conversations, we've had a lot of questions, a lot of rumor control, a lot of finger pointing, and as one of the things that we stated, or I stated specifically, within a week of the event, is that we wanted to have this meeting so that not only the people affected, but the people of this county can understand what is happening and how it happens. And when we say we're in contract with you guys to provide fire support and safety, that they understand what that really entails. And it's not just an easy, hey, we got a fire, go to steal the sheriff's line to put the wet stuff on the hot stuff, right? There's a lot more to it. So I just kind of want to go back to kind of the day of the event, and I appreciate what you're saying. You know, Mr. Captain Anzar and I, we go way back. You know, in my previous job, and I've seen you. Obviously, we worked together, so I know what you went through, and you were there doing that day, and I thank you very much for that. I thank the sheriff who allowed me to tag along and be a part of the problem of another person in a hot zone that's trying to make decisions and calls. So I want to thank you guys for allowing me to kind of see it firsthand. So what I want to know is kind of the day of the event. The first call comes in at 10:32, right? That's what you guys had on your list here. And going to a comment made earlier, a statement that there was a unit that was stopped at a house for protection. There was a unit that was a fire truck that was sitting there watching the house for protection. At what point did that unit say, hey, maybe we need to move and start doing a little bit more? Because I think the issue that a lot of people have is that there were two fires relatively close. And I think everyone is saying, well, it was one fire, and they don't realize that it wasn't one fire. And that unit was protecting that one resident until it was time for them to move, correct? I mean, it kind of, was that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Which
You
engine are
had
talking
stated
about?
you had stated that when you were released from your other engagement, that you were on the way home, and you said that on the way home there was one engine at a house on 6-bit.
Yeah, that was at the end of 6-bit Gulch. That is correct.
And was that unit just observing what was going on?
No, they were in active structure defense, protecting that house.
Okay, so I think because we all speak a language, right? You guys speak fire language, we speak politic language, right? I kind of speak a little of both. So when you're saying that they're there, they're actually engaged. It's not like we're just watching the fire creep over the hill, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Something else that you said, and not to put you on the spot, something else you said was that there was no water access in Chinese camp.
Yeah, there's no water system in Chinese camp.
Meaning you couldn't fill up, there was no tanks, there was no nothing. So to use your statement earlier is that you'd have to fill, unload, because my understanding, one of those rumors is that you had to get there, get the truck ready to go, drive to a location, fill up, come back, and now you're doing that back and forth, right? So, okay.
Correct.
And it's not a negative, by any means. It's not a negative, right? We're trying to understand. So people want to know, how did we get here, right? The whole reason I wanted to have this conversation is, how did we get here? Because there's a lot of people that feel that either the county didn't do enough, or you guys didn't do enough, or we didn't do enough together. And we want to make sure that if there were things that, as Supervisor Brandon stated, we could learn from, then we should learn from that, right? Because as I've expressed to Ms. Beats, I have told her, and as well as many others, the next fire is coming. And if we don't take opportunity to learn today from what occurred, so we have that on our bookshelf that we can go, then we failed, right? So we want to learn from that and say we're going forward. And by no means am I pointing any fingers. Am I saying Chinese camp was a loss because of any reason, or that, things happen, right? That there's just, there's a saying that combat is fluid, right? I know all of us type A personalities, when you're looking at something, you're not sitting back waiting for something. You're out there fighting, you're looking, you're trying to figure it out, right? So had we had water resources, Supervisor Brandon stated, in Chinese camp, that would have helped out considerably, right?
Yeah, a hydrant system would have helped out considerably.
Or maybe a huge storage tank.
On a note, though, when you have an overwhelming fire like this, a hydrant system can get overwhelmed.
No,
and last January, I was deployed to the Eaton fire for 10 days in Altadena, and the hydrants were all dead there.
Well, that might be a different political conversation for Eaton. We won't get down that path.
I think specifically, if you have a water system where Robert doesn't have to drive a significant distance to fill up and come back, you're going to decrease your engine fill times, and they can get back to work fighting fires sooner. So I do think you're accurate there.
Right, and I'm not casting anything saying that you did or didn't do the fastest, most, I was there with you. I stood there while that community was building shoulder to shoulder with the sheriff, as the embers are flying, watching what was happening. So I'm right there with you. Did you fill at Chicken Ranch? Was Chicken Ranch available? I know they had a truck. I know, sir, you said that earlier you didn't want to talk on their operational, which I totally appreciate. Were we able to fill at Chicken Ranch? Were they a partner? Were they active? Were they?
Yes, I did use the fire hydrant at the Chicken Ranch Fire Station.
Excellent. All right, thank you. And then, do they have a water tender truck?
No, they do not.
Okay, so it's not like, because that was one of the rumors, is that, well, there's all these trucks all over the county and no one used them, right? And we can't have a truck show up to our fire if it doesn't exist. Okay. Something, sir, that you stated earlier was operational decisions. Who's making the operational decisions on that day?
So specifically, we have the unit duty chief, which is what started out, and then we went into the complex incident organization. You have an incident commander. Some of the terminology that we were going to clean up during the presentation but didn't, when we're talking about individual fires, typically an individual fire will have an incident commander. In this scenario, it's basically a branch under ICS that's reporting to an overall incident commander, but the role is still serving in tactics. The incident commander over the complex is ensuring all the other general and command functions of ICS are working. So we have an operations section chief underneath the incident commander that is making the holistic operational decisions for the resources for the entire complex based off of life, property, environment.
Okay. So did we have someone specifically in Tuolumne County saying, hey, we have an event occurring. We know that our units are deployed elsewhere. We need to start recalling them, or you just call it moving the nut, right? Start moving people around to come back and start backfilling or supporting the situation that was unfolding within the Chinese camp area.
from a Tuolumne County Fire Department perspective, that did occur. I contacted Station 51 that morning, and they started calling any and all available volunteers that were not already assigned, in addition to the outreach that Captain Anzar did as well.
Okay. But I guess, and nothing against Captain Anzar, because, like, again, I wanted to make sure that, you know, he knows that we've been in these fights together, so I'm with you. But Captain Anzar is a volunteer, right? So was there a professional, and that might be poorly phrased, was there a member of the fire department that specifically said, hey, I'm here in Chinese camp? Because the comment that you made, sir, was that you didn't expect the fire to cross into Chinese camp, right? Right? That's what you said?
Yeah, so Utility 4456 that we keep referencing was acting as the incident commander, a well-versed fire captain, and made appropriate resource orders throughout the incident. It's just the resources weren't available.
No, and I'm not saying that they weren't by any means. I'm just saying that we had someone, because that was, again, we're trying to dispel a lot of false information, and the false information is nobody was there. The false information is that it was cooking off. The fire was burning. It started at 10:32, and as Supervisor Holland stated, you know, every 50 minutes or so, it was tripling in size. And so people are saying, well, the fire really started at 8:30. How come you didn't do anything? Well, those are two different fires, right? So
Correct. I referenced 6-2 at the beginning of the presentation.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
So I'm just supporting what you're saying for the presentation.
Let me get to the end of my position here. Is that so there was somebody there. There was, right, the 6-2 fire was going. It was doing its own thing. The 6-5 is going. You have resources there. And then the wind shifts, right? And so now it's approaching, and we just don't have the units, right? We just didn't have the ability to react as quickly as this thing was evolving. And you have to make a decision to go from property, life, and grasslands, right? So I guess my final question will be is, how many people died in this event?
Yeah, that'd be zero.
It'd be zero, right? So as much as people want to say, we didn't do this, we didn't do that, or we could have done this, or we could have done that, the end result is that nobody died in this event. We can rebuild homes, we can rebuild structures, we can rebuild fire trucks that get damaged, right? But we can't replace people. So there's a lot, I think, still to unravel and unpack about this. I think a lot of people still want to know, you know, was there a decision made? And I'm not going to ask you to answer this, will be rhetorical. Was there a decision made to save Murphy's and Ironstone because of a dollar value over Chinese camp? And again,
No. The question's out there, so I'll just be very upfront. Absolutely not.
Okay, well, I'm not saying you were. I'm not saying you guys were making that decision, but
No, but let's be honest. Like, we are triaging resources as the incidents unfold together. So specifically, when you have two counties, whether it's a base camp or you have two competing fires, what's out there in the public, and I'm pretty passionate about this, is there's an ideal that one will get a priority over other based on location or preference, and we don't operate like that.
Right.
We operate based on what's happening at the time.
Right.
So yeah, it is extremely unfortunate that 30 minutes roughly before we had a no divert and an immediate structure threat before the structure threat was identified on the 6-5 fire. That was a huge component to the ability to mobilize resources and move them. Absolutely. But at no point did we compare communities and make a decision to go protect one and not the other. And so I say that in your rhetorical response that I wasn't supposed to answer. Absolutely not. That's not how we do public service.
And I'm not saying you do, right? But there is that out there, and I want to make sure that we have it on the record. And my last question is, and this will be to you, sir, is that my understanding is that you drafted, promoted, and submitted the FMAG requirement, right? Do you know why we did not receive the FMAG?
Yeah, so I do this, obviously. I'm an incident commander on a CAL FIRE incident management team also, and I've done this across the state. And I've submitted, I'm not sure how many FMAGs, but quite a few, some of them through the Tuolumne Calaveras unit. And essentially the process goes through OES, and they're the holder with the state of California of who submits that to FEMA. I did submit both FMAGs that evening, and essentially, without going too far into it, when you submit an FMAG, you're looking at what the threat is going to be. It's not after the threat. It's how they approve those through FEMA. This one specifically, they said that we didn't meet the criteria for submittal. They reviewed it with FEMA. FEMA did not agree that it met what the minimum criteria was. So they decided not to have us forward it, because when you forward it, you get one shot, And once you ford it, if it gets shot down, no matter how much the incident grows or does anything else, you don't get a second shot. The 2.7 fire specifically, when we submitted that, they felt that it met that threat. We even went ahead and submitted a second time the next day, but obviously, from what I was saying before, once the threat's diminished, at that point, it's probably not going to get approved. We also went for the dollar amount. Obviously, there's a lot more infrastructure and a lot more value to the Chinese camp FMAG than there was to the 2.7 FMAG. But what the reviewers deemed after they reviewed it was that they didn't meet the minimum criteria.
And what was the minimum criteria that they?
So that's a good topic of discussion. So specifically, when it comes to structures, they actually don't tell us what that is. So
you're trying to hit a target that you don't know what it is.
So you fill out the form and you do it the appropriate way. I was told that the FMAGs that we submitted were two of the best ones that they'd seen in the last 5 years. And
No, I just find it unique. If it was you and I writing these things and you got it and I didn't because you do it professionally and I don't, I'd be okay with that, right? That's me. But we have the same guy, same event, same unit, same. One gets it and one doesn't. And we still to this day do not know why we did not get that.
And there was two different reviewers through OES also. So one went to one reviewer, one went to another that we're working directly with FEMA.
And I want to make sure that we are saying OES is the Cal OES, not our local OES.
Correct.
Right.
Cal OES.
Okay, so,
Affirmative.
bless you. Thank you. So you write it, it gets kicked up to Cal OES. Cal OES says, hey, it's good to go, right? Then it goes to the governor. The governor says it's good to go. Then it goes to FEMA.
They don't talk to the governor, but it's on behalf of the governor.
Oh, okay.
They do talk back and forth. They do a lot of clarifying criteria. The way that we do FMAGs and TCU is we actually have blanket criteria because we know what the values at risk are. Obviously, you have water, power, all these other things, mills, things that are extremely important to the economy. Those are the sort of things that also help in addition to the homes.
Right. Right. Because as Captain Anzar said, when the power company had to be shut down, there's a dollar loss there, right? I mean, they're impacted, and we have cleanups which are underway. We have a number of things that are costing the county a certain dollar amount. And if we did not receive that because Steve doesn't know how to fill out the form, then Steve needs to be educated. And I'm not saying by any means that was the case here. What I'm saying is that I want to know exactly why they said no. And if we don't know that, then how can we fix it in the future? And if it was you were too early to submit, well, I'll pop a fuse over that one because I'd rather get it in there now than wait until the situation gets out of hand and they say, oh, you should have done it then. So I appreciate your candor. I appreciate the hard work. Again, I know that you guys this is in no way me pointing any fingers. This is a partnership, and I just want to know how we're going to address it in the future, prevent it in the future, and Captain Anzar, you hit it right on the head. It's in law enforcement, there's a saying, if it's predictable, it's preventable. I'm sure you guys have the exact same saying, right? If we can get there was a question made earlier is what can we learn from this? I think everybody in all of our communities could just look at Chinese camp and say, clean your stuff, right? Victim blaming is not, what we're here to do. We're not to say that anybody did anything wrong in Chinese camp, but we can learn from this, and we appreciate your time bringing this forward. So I do want to thank you. I want to thank the Sheriff's Department, the Highway Patrol, all of the other agencies that took part in making the most important part of my entire diatribe here is that no one died. So we can rebuild and learn from this. So thank you.
Great. I got a follow-up question. Yeah, that's fine. And then I'd like to go after that to public comment. I figure we might have some closing comments as well. But Supervisor Holland?
Hey, who does 456 call? Like when they're calling in resources, who are they calling? Like, I'm assuming that's the overall incident command, because I don't speak your guys' language at all. Steve might be better than I do, but.
So the San Andreas Emergency Command Center is your resource ordering point, your dispatching for your fire resources in Calaveras and Tuolumne counties. And did you say the 6-5 Is that what you referenced, or
Well,
what?
yeah, because you said utility 4456.
Oh, utility 4456. So when they're at scene, they're going to get on the radio and they're going to hit San Andreas with a resource request specifically. Under this complex incident organization, it's the operations overseeing all 21 fires. It's going to get that request and then process it through. So there's two things going on. It's a reallocation of what we have or what we can produce. In addition to that, it's going in through the system into the CAD and then through the IROC system to do more of a global statewide request for what's not immediately available to come in.
So do they, because I don't understand this,
Sure.
that's why I'm asking. So they radio over to the dispatch center in San Andreas, and there's a guy, a woman in a blue uniform that's some rank, and they got a little magnetic board with all the pieces, and they're like, okay, send this here, send that there. I know that's
It's not magnetic, but yeah,
very simplistic.
we have resource tracking mechanism there. We also, it's being resource tracked in the computer automated dispatching system as well. But the resource orders that come in are being filtered through that communications piece to the operations and then into the ordering system.
So who was it that was actually making those decisions to say, send that resource or don't send that resource, or send that resource left, don't send it that way?
So it would
send
be
right?
our operations over the incident, which is Division Chief Lauren Munson. Unfortunately, he's not here today, but he was working on behalf of our incident commander on looking at essentially your magnetic board that you're discussing to see what we have, what we can mobilize and send, and then those orders going in addition to that.
And obviously when they go statewide, they're just trying to get stuff to come in, but.
Correct. So it's
Mr.
a
Mustard? what'd you say?
Munson. It's a division chief level position that's making that call on this specific incident. Cal
Division
Fire.
chief is wearing all of this.
Think of Nathan.
All right. So it's Nathan's counterpart on the other
Correct.
side of the river.
Yeah, filling an ICS role
And then they decide where what fire truck goes where.
based on the priorities. Yeah.
Priorities. Okay. Okay, thanks.
All right. With that, we'll open up for public comment. Any member of the public who would like to speak on this item, please come forward. You'll have 3 minutes. There'll be a beep at 1 minute, letting you know you have 1 minute remaining. Official procedures will be Rochambeau if you ever are not sure in the future.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Hi, my name is Don Nessel. I have 43 years' experience as a wastewater operator. I only have 3 minutes, so I'm going to read my outline rather than elaborate because I always run out of time. So it looks to me like there's a need for improving available water in Chinese Camp. A new tank up on the hill, because there's a hill right across the street, in Chinese Camp would be a really good option. Also, if it was going to happen, maybe there'd be some philanthropist, either a person or an organization would say, well, I want to fix that. So I think we might put together a shovel-ready project before anybody decides that it's even going to happen. I have a couple engineers that I work with personally. We do pro bono stuff. We'd be interested in working on this project. I've been down there several times looking at the site. You also could opt to, since Ultra Power was so generous with their water and they could have caught fire, that amazes me, we could maybe look at improving and giving them a larger water tank as an option for water availability in the entire area. You have a fire somewhere else, there, all through that valley before you get to the big hill going to Groveland. There's also a problem with the proximity of the wells in Chinese Camp to their septic systems. Therefore, environmental health hesitates to issue building permits right now because they want to work out, well, I don't know if you can use your septic system anymore because your well is right over there. So if you were able to solve the water problem with a local energy agency that distributes water, it would have them get their water from that, and then they could use their leach fields. Let's see, number 6. There's also a potential list of options for developing a wastewater system in Chinese Camp. The idea is that we would improve water so there could be fire hydrants, the key word being fire. And then if there were fire hydrants, there would be a way to load, and there would also be a way to fight the fire before it crossed those roads into Chinese Camp. If it could have been soaking that dry grass right there for 50 feet or so, it wouldn't have done it. So I'm proposing that maybe, I don't know even how it works with LAFCO, that there'd be some sort of blue ribbon committee put together to talk to and find out who the hot players are in this that could make this happen. And so I'm volunteering, and I'd like to be able to talk to you more about how that might work. Hooray.
Great, thank you. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. So first of all, I would just like to say that considering that this appears to be like the worst case scenario in this particular event, that no one was killed, I would say that the response was a success. So, and I know that hurts to people who have lost their homes. That would be terrible to have that happen to you. But considering the circumstances, pretty happy with what I hear, and I appreciate your guys' efforts to dispel any misinformation that's spreading online. It hurts to think that there are people out there who are attacking the very people who were attempting to save them. So thanks to all the firefighters and the sheriff and everyone who pitched in to make sure that nobody died. Some of the, solutions, of course, there's multiple solutions and multiple things that can be added, and there's never going to be a perfect situation unless we have $1 billion just to throw at this. So, but one of the things that was not mentioned, in addition to defensible space, which I think is the highest priority for each individual homeowner, but there's also home hardening, and I know you guys have had discussions about that a lot, and I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a grant, isn't there, that's coming online, and that people could be encouraged to do some hardening on their homes. I disagree vehemently with forcing people to do things to their homes, but I think that they should be motivated intrinsically to do things, and I think most of these guys know, and most builders know, that in a traditionally constructed attic, in the summer months, an attic is under negative pressure pretty much the whole time, and it's like a vacuum. It's just sucking stuff into the attic. And especially during a fire, that just gets worse with the wind blowing through the vents and over the top of the roof. And the suction that's coming up through the eaves of every traditionally constructed attic is amazing. You can almost see it, just the vapor. If you're not even near a fire, you can watch air vapor go in and come out. And so if someone were to come to me and say, what's the first thing I should do to harden my home? I would say to change your attic vents. That would be the first and least expensive thing that can be done. There's multiple things that can do, but that's a good place to start, because I believe most fires in a structure originate in the attic. So I could be wrong on that, but I think that's the least expensive and best place to start. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning.
One thing that I'd recommend is if we could drop Calaveras and just keep it Tuolumne. You guys have heard California has made Tuolumne the highest fire risk in California. So it's important that we keep a mandatory minimum resources in Tuolumne. To answer your question about what can we do in the future, maybe work out an agreement with BLM, talk to Trump. And if there's a fire, let CAL FIRE work it. I think that was a big problem with this one. Since it was on BLM land, I believe they waited a good hour to get approval to work on the land. As far as Tuolumne fire engines working this fire, I don't think very many of them did. The Tuolumne engines were stuck at their place of their home, basically, and a few of them responded to accidents. There was a pretty big car accident. I believe 2 engines responded to it. And then as far as Chicken Ranch, they did not respond to the Chinese campfire as it is outside their operation of activity. So, and that's about all I got to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have additional public comment? We'll, for any technical things that are brought up too, bring it up for any clarification or response after. So. All right, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Barry Rudolph.
And I had a list I'd written before I decided to come down here this morning. But after hearing this presentation, I don't have anything really I want to talk about on this list because I'm sitting in the back there with two of my closest associates when we used to do this for a living. And I was proud as hell listening to this presentation. And I've kind of at a loss here as to some of the questions here. Is I'm thinking that I think some folks would benefit from some ride-alongs, would benefit from some more in-person visits to the tours of the command center to see how that operation runs. I think it would answer a lot of the questions that I've been listening to here this morning. 140 loads from Columbia. In 1980, I was a seasonal firefighter, and that was the first job I ever had. That's an uncontrolled airport. That's 280 trips back and forth. 300, almost 300 runs. And I'm sure those pilots were picking up their gear and setting up for the drop. So the workload for that was not like get in your S2, fly down to Mariposa, cruise along a little bit, have a sip of iced tea, and then set up for the drop and come back and do it all over again and maybe make 4 of those runs in a day. That's impressive. When I heard that number, everything else to me was just like, whoa, that's unheard of. I don't even know how many S2s that was to do that, but it's a lot. And I guarantee you that the ground crews that were there working on that, they were working their tails off, and I'll bet they were tired. And I know those pilots were probably tired too. And I did remember seeing on the 2-7 all of the retardant drops that were placed all over that hill in front of homes, in front of everywhere. And it's like those drops saved homes. Okay? The timing. I can't believe Robert Anzar, there was nothing better when you were going to some fire at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's Robert Anzar on a text message. Hey, you want me to bring the water tender or the engine? Bring the water. Got 21 of these engines. Got one of you. And you heard him tell you. He was calling, trying to muster everybody else to come. There are 10 active volunteers in this county in 2025. In 2015, when I retired, there were 7. He was there. Defensible space. The wildland fire environment, fuel, topography, weather.
And that's 3 minutes.
The
Thank
only
you.
thing we can complete and fix is the fuels.
We have to end at 3 minutes. Thank you.
I know. Defensible space.
Good morning.
Name's Scott Friend. I'm basically in the same boat that my friend Barry Rudolph was in. I think having served in public safety for quite a long time, there's 3 things that you have to do: accountability, transparency, and provide answers. That was done at a very professional level here today. Those gentlemen sitting right there, that one there, have done this throughout the state of California for a very long time. My other issue is, I don't really have one. It is, Robert said it very succinctly, the state of California will always have fires. If you look at the large and damaging fires that we've had, it's always been through a weather event. Those won't stop, okay? We're going to have fires, we're going to have structure loss. They did everything in their power to mitigate that and the loss of life. I think now, since this is over, we need to focus on recovery for the people in Chinese camp, and, like you said, prevention. Okay? Defensible space, home hardening. Supervisor Jaron brought up a very good point, and so did Supervisor Campbell. And these gentlemen here, there are people in this community, I know this for a fact, that cannot do their own defensible space. They don't have the money, they're too old, they have medical problems, the whole bit. CAL FIRE generously has a grant that is available for seniors and disabled throughout this county to do that. They are taking care of that part of that evolution that we're experiencing here. And California has a climate where we are going to have fires, okay? It's a tragedy that people lost homes in Chinese camp. It really is. And it sounds kind of callous to say we need to move on. Yeah, we should remember each and every one of those persons, but recovery and making sure that we can do everything from your end and their end, which they're already doing, to make sure those people have a chance in case we get another weather event like this or we get an uncontrolled wildfire, okay? CAL FIRE puts out so many fires every day that you never hear about. This is one you heard about. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I think our last morning speaker before we say good afternoon.
Yes, it is. My name is Dan Overvadet. I'm a retired fire captain from Tuolumne, Calaveras. It seems like we keep circling back to the 6'5" in the staffing. So just to reiterate what's already been said, FKU, Fresno Kings, Madera Mariposa, Tuolumne, Calaveras, and Amador El Dorado both had fires that were 1,000 plus acres. Some units had multiple fires that were 1,000 plus acres. So when you start going to fires that are 1,000 acres, fires that are 10 acres, fires that are 0.5 acres, you take a lot of staffing, a lot of engines to support those fires. When the smoke's all gone and there's no flame, now you got to mop those fires up. You don't mop them up properly, which takes an abundant amount of resources. 1,000-acre fires, you're probably going to have 10 or 15 engines on it, mopping up for days. So let's just look at all the resources that are committed from Fresno Kings to Amador El Dorado. All those units there's nothing to put on any more fires. That's why you're bringing San Luis engines, Yosemite to Monterey engines, to Tuolumne, Calaveras to fight fire to backfill. These fires are staffed, and they're staffed for 24, 48, maybe a week. Mop up, cut in line, fire's not out. You got to control it. You got to put a control line in down to bare mineral soil, plus to mop it. You start robbing these other fires, start robbing engines from one fire to put it on another fire. Now, you got 3 Chinese campfires. So it's not as easy as, why didn't you take an engine here and an engine there? They didn't have the engines to put on there. The unit was swamped with fires. Our neighboring units had fires going. Everybody had a going fire going. So I get it. You understand why, there wasn't fire engines on this fire per se, but everything was committed in the unit. We had Stanislaus County, San Joaquin County, they were coming up. They had local government engines. I think Barry said it right. Maybe when these things are happening, go to the command center or right along with your local chiefs or get together with the unit chief or the division chiefs and find out what's going on. It's easy to say, why didn't we have this, why didn't we have that? Because we were fighting a lot of fire, or they were. All these units were on drawdown, not only us, but the surrounding units. That's why we were getting engines that were 3 or 4 hours away come and fight fire in this unit. Just a little clarity on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dory Beach, Tuolumne County Office of Emergency Services. And just to take a a few moments to say thank you to my partners, both in the fire side as well as law enforcement. Our job in OES is to support the first responders during an incident, and our job is made a lot easier because we have phenomenal response in this county and the work that they do. I would be remiss to also help, and to Supervisor Campbell's question, remind the board as we look at future strategies and funding, and it's already been said, a lot of work goes into preparedness and prevention. We need to continue to support those efforts, engaging our homeowners, our property owners about defensible space, making sure that we have adequate funding to support those that can't afford to do so. Really do that. I would have never thought that Chinese camp would have burned, and I think it is important for all of us to really understand that there are many communities in Tuolumne County that may be in that same situation in the future. So the more that we could do to support the prevention and preparedness, also mitigation, all of you spoke to those things that we could be doing and looking for future funding to do mitigation work is really, really important. It's important for the work all of us do in making sure that we can survive and support our community during recovery. I'm proud that we are working with our community in Chinese camp to remove the debris removal and get them to that next steps. But this is a great example of how we can continue to work together on all levels to prevent this in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any additional public comment? Going once, going twice. Okay, with that, we will close public comment on this item. I appreciate that. Chief, I want to turn it to you if there was any response or anything that you wanted to say to some of the public comments. I know we had a couple questions in there. We tend to not have a back and forth during the session.
Sure. One point of clarity for the Red Hills Wildlife Area. We do not have to get permission to suppress fires on the BLM land because it is the state responsibility area. So through our agreements, it's in our direct protection area, and we will suppress those fires. There are parameters in the Red Hills that ask that we try to limit impacts when we are able to. On this specific fire, we were not able to limit impacts, and it was a full suppression effort that entire time. So I think one thing that could be clarified is the time of dispatch to the time at scene was not due to permission being requested. It was due to the fact that it was remote, and it was not in a location that was easy to get to find for the first arriving resource, but was not related to our ability to suppress fires there.
Great, thank you. Well, I think there's a lot of thank yous to go around. Air Attack, of course, very proud of everybody. But to say that what OAS Director Dory Beats mentioned, this is the lowest fire risk area of the county, which is hard to say after a disaster like this. It's one of the lowest fire risk areas of the county. And I'm really proud personally of the response. And it's the list of thank yous being Air Attack, Local 281, of course, and our deputies and law enforcement partners, Jamestown Energy, formerly Ultra Power, for the use of the water, OES, which has done an immense amount of planning and staffing and grant writing in advance too. This affects all the staff at the county. It affects PG&E and utility partners that come out, the cleanup crews that are out there, Chicken Ranch and Tuolumne Band that supported all the recovery efforts. And it's good to see that, again, I think in the public comments, a lot of the work that's been done in the last 5 years, I would say, has been successful. That as much as this is a tragedy, it was a success given the circumstances, that it was not worse, that it was not multiple incidents of this happening, and that this has been a priority, and I think it shows. So a lot of thank yous, and I, just with my closing thoughts of where do we move forward, we need to add teeth, I think, to our vegetation management ordinance beyond 4291, but also the vacant properties, and give direction on seeing this for not just education, but defining the cannots and the will nots. There are both. How do we help those that cannot do it and comply? How do we force those who are will nots that refuse to do it? And it has to have both those solutions. Temporary on-site water storage and draft points, and OTUD's worked a lot on that, and they've brought that up to our meetings, and long-term fire flow, I think, make a lot of sense, especially in recovery efforts, and a recovery plan overall. There's a lot of uninsured properties. I think I've had conversations with Supervisor Griefer and expressing support that as you lead a recovery plan there, that's something that I think we need to look at. And the last bit is looking at some of the preventative measures, you know, as that line of questioning, separate from the fire response, how do we get very nimble about deploying bulldozers or preventative resources where even if there is a 5% risk that this could conflagrate into a community, we're able to cross property boundaries, do bulldoze lines, and not draw on fire assets, but draw on local assets that otherwise might be sitting there, and not wait until that happens. Worst comes to worst, we get an ugly fire break that will keep us safer for the next one, and I think that's a good path. And lastly, looking at this, I think the worst part about this disaster is the insurance aspect of it, is because insurance is getting so expensive and because of maybe more that we can do locally as well and in the state. The worst part is going to be that we have a lot of folks, not just that lost everything, but will not have anything more coming in to rebuild. And we're dealing with somewhat of a refugee crisis in that. So that's what we're going to have to plan for. And how do we make sure that we're doing some of these steps like the defensible space, aggressively expanding that and giving it teeth that might give us a leg to stand on to see about insurance not quite going up as fast as it could, or the home hardening as mentioned. So my comments and thoughts on it. Supervisor Griefer?
Yeah, thank you. I kind of want to address a couple of comments that were made. I think it's important that the people who know, like the back row, you guys know what you did in the past, and you guys speak this very specific language. And to be painfully honest, no one cares in Chinese camp about any place else that burned. They want to know why their homes burned. They want to know why their life has been uprooted and completely destroyed. They don't care about anything that's going on in Salinas or the other areas. They want to know why that occurred. And these meetings are here to answer that question. We want people to understand that the reason these events occurred at some point is because there's a lot of other things that were happening at the same time. And sometimes bad things happen. And it's not because we chose to let Chinese camp burn. Right? We fought it. We fought the battle, and sometimes, like you said, I think that the thing I took away the most is your statement of we didn't expect it to happen, and Mother Nature decided, well, watch this, hold my beer, and they threw you this big downwind, and then here we are. So that's why we have these meetings. And another comment that was made, I was in the sheriff's car. I was riding with the chief that day, that night, so I know I was there. So I mean, your electeds have a certain obligation to be a part of, but they should never be a part of the problem. And by me sticking my nose in there or being another person, I don't want to be a part of the problem. So we have these meetings to get that word out. And the byproduct of this is that, as Supervisor Brandon mentioned earlier, is that the county in the past has asked for tax measures or ways to raise funds and stuff. And if the people don't believe that the money that the county is paying CAL FIRE is producing a return of, well, why did Chinese camp fire burn? Right, then they're going to be less likely to say, I want to give CAL FIRE more money. So we have to explain to them how we got here and what we're doing to ensure the future fire doesn't occur through the steps being made through our, Zone Zero programs and things like that, as well as coming up with a way to make sure that they understand what they can do to help us as well. So it's a very complex program and problem, and I recommend to all of the electeds. Tomorrow I'm meeting with Senator Padilla's office at Chinese camp to look at what occurred and how we can address it. And something Supervisor Brandon said some time ago, which was very insightful. Again, you can write that one down as well. Is that we have an election coming up for the insurance, and this is kind of to the general public, for the insurance commissioner. And I think it would be important to have those after the primary come here and see what happens when you can't afford to have homeowner insurance, when you can't afford to rebuild, and you can't afford, and the people that are out there in uniform saving properties and lives are risking their lives for this. We want to make sure that it's all working together. So I, again, am just amazingly grateful for all of the efforts that you guys have done. This is in no way intended to be an attack upon CAL FIRE or attack. Now, there's a lot of raw feelings and emotions floating around, especially in Chinese camp, and I want to be able to say, yeah, I looked you guys square in the eyes and say, yeah, how'd it go? And we all come out of this room shoulder to shoulder fighting the next one together. It's not an us versus you or anything along those lines. I am all in favor of coming up with a way to put a large water tank somewhere, as you stated, maybe something we can do to have those quicker trips, maybe working with our businesses that are on the periphery there, coming up with a way to, I think, Don, I thought you mentioned it, maybe working with somebody who could bring down a line into that area for sewage. So we are in the rebuilding phase, right? We're in the recovery phase, and thank God for our rock star OES team and everything. So, yeah, this is personal, right? I know these people individually, not just as a supervisor, but I want to make sure that they're getting the best answers and the best return for their values, and that we're being held all accountable for both the good and the bad, right? I mean, you guys, number one, no one died. So as long as I don't have to worry about going to that, that's primary for me. So I appreciate this time. That's it for me.
Supervisor Campbell.
Chiefs, I'm always really impressed by your professionalism and your the way you present things with data and really give a clear picture of what actually happened. As we know, anybody who's been through emergencies and had to respond to them knows that it is very confusing, and there isn't a lot of good information even within the emergency response agencies while the emergency is going on. But and then the information going outside of that to the public is often very inaccurate. And so we end up in a situation where we have to, after the fact, correct the record and give a clear picture of what the timelines were, where resources were allocated, and the scope of the fire. And I think that you accomplished that exceptionally well here today. I really hope that people that have questions about the Chinese campfire watch this. I also wanted to, Supervisor Brandon kind of went into the area where I was kind of asking you questions before, is what do we do? We should use this as an opportunity to learn how to change our practices in the future to improve. We can always improve. And one of the things that was highlighted was the vegetation management ordinance, which we do have on the books. And Supervisor Brandon, you said that it needs to have teeth. And I would argue that it does have teeth. What we need to change is we need to enforce it. It is on the books. It exists in this county. It was worked through with a great deal of effort and care and thought to the balance between the rights of a private property owner and then the broader responsibility that we all have as property owners to make sure that we are doing our due diligence and being good stewards of fuels on our property. That exists. And one of the things that Supervisor Griefer and I have been talking about, and it's been brought up in the Fire Safety Advisory Committee, is that we don't have an inspector to enforce the rules of the ordinance that we have already on the books. So I would say that to me would be one of the first places I would look to help prevent and make these types of events less likely in the future, is just looking at the ordinances and the rules that we already have existing, enforcing them, and making sure that our citizens have the tools to know what those rules are before even looking at doing anything new or adding additional regulations or anything like that. I think that there's enough existing right now that we could put in play in a more effective way that would make a lot of that specifically would prevent some of the likelihood of ignition in an event exactly like the fire in Chinese camp. I don't want to say that it would 100% have prevented it, but some of the elements that we see in the clear light of day, it was fuels management had was a huge contributing factor to the level of destruction that took place. So we need to start looking at that, I think, seriously.
Supervisor Holland.
Yeah, I think we asked some of these questions because we want the general public to know the answers. There's a lot of social media stuff that goes on out there. People have all this speculation, but it's easier to hear the answers directly from you guys. You can point to and say, well, here's the answer, right? Because otherwise, it's just a narrative. Everybody runs with it. And I honestly think it's much easier to come here and talk to us than being grilled by the grand jury or something like that, because now the public gets to hear the answers. They understand what's going on. They're the ones that fund this, and they're the ones that pay for this. And so that's what they want to know. And so I'm super happy no one died. We're not going to funerals. I mean, someone made a comment about having $1 billion. Well, Southern California had $1 billion plus, and look what happened down there. So Mother Nature will do what it's going to do. I talked to Nathan about this. We're very fortunate these fires did not start a couple miles up the hill in the big timber, because it'd be a whole different conversation we'd be having right now. Because if we got that many lightning strikes up in the big timber, when everything was dry, it would have been a much different scenario we would have had. Much, much different. But luckily those thunderstorms rolled through the lower lands, which is still bad for Chinese Camp, but it would have been much more devastating for our county. So anyways, thank you guys for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Okay. With that, thank you. Appreciate the presentation, board members for the discussion, and direction and thoughts on that as well. And I believe that is the end of our agenda, so we can adjourn the meeting at 12:16. Thank you, everybody, for attending.